Enough fun. Now we go to the meeting. It is 6 o'clock, and I hereby call to order the regular meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission for Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. Sherry, could we have a roll call, please?
Chair Quilisi,
Here?
Commissioner Trent,
Here.
Commissioner Murphy. Here. Commissioner Starkweather,
Here.
Vice Chair Bennett is absent.
Absent. Right. Okay, if you'll all follow me on the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Okay. Any suggested changes to the agenda, Lucas?
No.
Okay. And we don't have any visits and ex parte contacts because there's no
Not a physical site.
entities
Right.
involved in cases tonight. Very good. Next is public communications, the time set aside during the Planning Commission meeting for people to speak on items of city business that are not on the agenda. Do we have anyone here present who wishes to speak? Okay.
But she'll speak on the agenda.
Barbara wants to speak on the agenda.
Okay. So no one here present to speak on non-agendized items. Sherry, do we have anyone waiting with a hand raised?
No.
Okay, very good. Then we'll move on to the public hearing item, draft revisions to the formula
sorry.
business ordinance. Lucas?
Yes, thank you, Chair Quilisi. My name is Lucas Seibert, Community Development Director for the City of Ojai. And tonight I am bringing forward a draft revisions to the Ojai Municipal Code Section 10-21713, formula business establishments regarding revisions to the definitions and criteria applied to evaluate new businesses. I'm going to do kind of a setting the table type of discussion and then identify what some of those changes are. So since the City Council entered into the moratorium in June of 2021 to temporarily lower the numeric trigger for proposed formula businesses, the Planning Commission, this body, the community as a whole, including business community, the chamber and staff have reviewed the existing provisions and provisions from other cities. Staff has provided information and responses to Planning Commission questions related to numeric number and other community implementation and standards. From that, we have responded to community questions and input received. And then the Planning Commission has reviewed this matter and provided comments and direction at 4 separate meetings dating back to 2021. City Council has also reviewed and given direction and created a moratorium extended until May 26th of this year, which is coming up. And then recently, on March 21st, the city held a community input session which included community members and staff, which were engaged in a discussion with additional input that was then extended until April 4th. That then resulted in a summary memo that is a part of the attachment to this administrative report, which is attachment B. The community input session focused on input for 2 questions, the first being the number of qualifying businesses, the second being should a website online presence be counted as a business location, aka collective marketing. The response from the community came in regarding the number, which identified a proposed reduction in the qualifying number from more than 10 to more than 5. For example, as an example, a business who submits for a business license and staff performs the due diligence necessary for it, discovers the business is located in 4 other locations. This business would be the 5th in Ojai, as an example. That example would actually be okay for that business to locate within the city. Now, regarding the second question, that was the first question. The second question regarding the website presence question, AKA collective marketing. After all the research and review and community input, the community came to a consensus that this matter is far too complicated and even more complicated to regulate, and thus the input received by staff identifies leaving this aspect out of the code. And that conversation started as early as 2021 with this body, and then continued to council, and then bounced back to this body as well, and then went to the community on 2 different input sessions, the most recent one being in March. Now, the proposed revisions before this commission for consideration as an exhibit to the resolution, which is the resolution is attachment A. The exhibit is exhibit 1 to attachment A. Includes errata, clarifications to the form of the business definition, and reduction in the establishments from more than 10 to more than 5. And it includes a standardized menu definition and an exemption section that's been added as a proposal, which calls out definable terms within Title 10, Chapter 2, Article 36, which is the definitions and glossary. Staff is recommending approval of this resolution, which includes the draft resolution, which would then be forwarded, the ordinance itself will be forwarded to City Council for final consideration. With that, that concludes my presentation. If Commission has any questions of staff, I could certainly answer them. This is a public hearing, so we will need to open it up for public.
Right.
Go ahead.
I have questions about the content of the red line version. Should that come during deliberation? I would think so.
Yes.
Okay.
The previous ordinance, the 10th,
Current ordinance.
current ordinance, the 10th business is the one that, so otherwise, if you had 9 other ones, then the 10th one became
No, the 11th one is what.
was 11th.
It
Okay.
says
More than 10.
10 more.
So we're going from 10 to 4.
No,
Oh,
We're going from 11 to 5. More.
Okay.
So it's more than 5.
11 to 5, okay.
And more, so it's 11 to 6. So the 6th one is the qualifying one.
And the exemption proposed here, how's that different than the one we had before?
Okay, so if you look at the ordinance itself and you look at the red line version,
I don't,
yeah, it's gonna be 4 of 6. I'm not sure what the number is. 11 out of 15. There's been a new section referred to as Section F.
Yeah, I'm reading that.
Exemptions, a form of the business shall not include any of the following 3 business establishment types, which highlights banks and financial services, gas stations, business, administrative, and professional. Those are all defined terms.
Okay.
And when discussed in the most recent community input session, there was a consensus going back to when the ordinance was originally adopted in 2007 that those types of businesses were never in the conversation. Not specified here, so we're actually putting that in writing now, moving forward. Now, I will note that it doesn't include, like for instance, convenience stores, because those are considered retail. So those would fall under the category of retail, which then would have to would go under the scrutiny of the definition for forming the business.
because it's not one of the exemptions.
Correct.
I thought, though, that there were exemptions in the current ordinance.
There are not. Yes, there is one, which is already identified above, which is, if I could get the.
Not
So
paragraph E.
subsection D states at the very end, provided, however, a formula business shall not include a automated standalone vending machine. That ordinance revision was in 2011, 2012.
Okay, well, the original ordinance was really passed, it appears from its plain language, it was done specifically aimed at fast food restaurants
That's one of the parameters.
as a
but-
business.
But not the only. It includes retail as well. Restaurant and retail.
Okay, retail sales or rental, okay. And that's in black here, so that's part of the original. All right. Any other clarifying questions for staff?
Yeah, just a quick question. On attachment A, page 4 of 6, number 2, standardized menu, was that already in the code? Did we just move it?
No, it is not currently in the code. There is a provision above that says standardized menu, but it had not been defined previously.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I do remember seeing that. Okay, cool. I did also want to comment on the thoroughness of what you guys put together in going through this formulary business plan. Not only did you get the community input, you did a study of other cities, you put all the information on the website. I thought it was very well done, very comprehensive.
Yeah, we tried. I mean, the reality is that because this has been going on for over 2 years, it really needed to have its own little platform, especially when we were getting and gearing up for the community input session. So individuals leading into that meeting, some of them are here tonight, some were here virtually or otherwise, had an opportunity to kind of catch themselves up to what had been going on over the last 2 years.
Yeah, because this is an extremely important ordinance.
Yeah, and teasing that information out of each of those meetings, I mean, it was a chore for us to find all that information, given it was in various meetings over the span of 2 years.
Good job.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
One last thing. Are all of the terms in paragraph D, 1 through 10 now, are they all in 10.2.36.02?
No. No, those terms are defined
should we
here and
expect-
only here.
Okay.
Right.
So if they were to appear in 36.02, it would refer you back to this section.
Correct. If we were to do that as a kind of belt and suspenders approach,
Or a glossary at some point.
Right.
If that were to be added to the code, then it would point back to this.
as a side note, I know this body had talked about that as a provision through our Title X discussion, probably 3 years ago, actually.
Okay, just a couple of others. I note in the exemptions now that you have business, administrative, and professional. Does that include real estate? Is that a professional?
I'd have to go back and look at the
Business or
definition. I think it
administrative?
does. I
Is it-
believe it does, which was the point.
I was wondering because there are obviously real estate businesses here in town that have more than 5 outside.
Yeah, I think business administrator and professional actually has a laundry list of different types
In
of
3602, okay.
Correct.
Are tax advisors in there as well?
likely.
Financial services.
Yeah, within the professional, I think, or administrative, each of those terms then has not within itself its own subsets of descriptions, but the three of them then have a laundry list of
I confess I
similars.
didn't go back and read 3602 again before the meeting. Okay. Any other questions for staff? All right, well, let's open the public hearing for public comment. Does anyone here present wish to speak on this agenda item? If so, come forward with a speaker's card.
Who would like it?
The boss. Boss.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you. All right, and in the order in which they were handed to me,
In the order of importance.
No.
all right, first up, Barbara Bowman. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to kind of speak on myself as a retailer, and I'm going to speak on behalf of Jamie Fleming, who could not be here tonight. So if I run a little over 3 minutes, he asked me to do that, who's head of the chamber.
3
Yes. He asked me to speak on his behalf regarding this. So the thing is, when you were correct, we did spend a lot of time on this, and the staff spent a lot of time on it. And Lucas ran a wonderful community arrangement where we all came and left our opinions, and then we went and we did surveys. And we surveyed, I would say, the majority of the businesses, and then we surveyed people who lived within the city limits. So there was a lot behind this, and most people said they would be okay with 5, but they really wish there was not 5, that it was less. But we figured that, to gently do this, we would go with 5. But almost everybody I spoke to, from the businesses to the people living in the community, said, why do we even have to have 5? So the 5 is the established number. We're not going to go back and revisit that. But this was a unanimous thing. I mean, if you put this out in a survey in the newspaper, you would have I would say 98% of the people saying they absolutely do not want chains. And we have excluded all of what you were mentioning, all of the, business, from tax people to real estate people, the normal banks. But this is for brick and mortar, mom and pop stores. That's what this protection's all about, which is the backbone of Ojai. The backbone of Ojai's commerce is single owner, mom and pop stores, and we're very unique in that way because we have not gone with what other cities have, So many cities have lost their character because of the downtown, and we have not done that. So I thank you for doing, Lucas, such a good job of writing that proposal, and I hope that you pass it unanimously because I think it's a really important step towards, the whole general plan of Ojai. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up, Bianca Rowe.
Good evening. My name is Bianca Rowe, and I used to be a proprietor of a business here in town, a retail store, and it was called In the Field. And
Oh, yeah.
I am here tonight to share with full transparency that a lot of what has happened pertaining to this code has directly affected me, and it is difficult for me to share. So, there was a reason that we have a moratorium in town, and it was discovered that there were loopholes in the code where stores were capable of adjusting their business model in order to become part of Main Street. For example, make an adjustment to their name. And that way they were able to circumnavigate our code and open their store in town. This was something that has happened, and it was something that became a big red flag. And together as local business owners, we came to the city and we shared what had happened, and we shared our concerns, and most importantly, we had an ear that was available to share why it was detrimental and impactful to our business. As a small business in town, and I'm going to be totally honest, I opened my business with no investors, with no capital, on credit cards, and the grace of God. And I
Common
did it
story.
because I moved from the city, and I didn't want to be in the entertainment industry anymore. And my dream was to bring up my child in Ojai and for him to go to Oak Grove because he was 3 years old and stopping on the street and hugging trees. And that's where he's meant to be. And I didn't know what else to do with myself. So I got a real estate license first. That real estate agency used to be in the building that became my retail store. When this, and I am going to say chain store because they had 10 brick and mortars, but they changed their name, arrived in town, it created major conflict for our buying power. And a lot of the lines that we represented, we lost because that store was capable of buying from that designer $150,000 per season, and we could buy 5. There's no competition. And I'm not going to say we, I lost my will to keep fighting. But I do not lose the will to fight for town. And so I'm here to say that this is important. And it is so important to protect the community because we're here because we believe in town, but we're here because we need to tighten up the loopholes. And thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Is that the name of her store?
Larry Steingold?
What's the name of her store?
said infield, but I don't know if they spell it
Good
that way.
evening, gentlemen, ladies. I support the 5-store, and your first line of defense will be the real estate agent or the owner of the building, because everybody here has to come and get a permit to do business. And every broker and every owner and property manager should be aware that their lease or their purchase and sales agreement should be contingent upon getting the blessing of the city. And that's every owner, every commercial property owner, every commercial property tenant, because they can sublease. So if you notify all the property managers and all the agents and all the owners that when they get a prospect, all they gotta do is tell him or her, say, hey, it's contingent upon you getting the blessing of the town, on top of getting the permit, business permit, and all the other stuff that you have to do business. So when you pass this, besides putting it in the paper and doing it, whether it's the chamber or the real estate community or whatever, they all need to get a nice little piece of paper that says, you want to have somebody come into town? No problem. They got to come into town and get a blessing. And that keeps it really simple, because then you'll go, oh, let's do some deep diving. Who are your owners? Who are your investors? Where's your product? Who's managing the firm? Where do you get your signage? The whole 9 yards of everything, so that you can say, hey, sorry, you have the same owner in 6 of your stores. You've got the same management team. You've got the same marketing team. You've got, sorry, go away. That's what I would do. But you got to tell them up front, and you're going to use a 2x4. And it's very easy. You just have to tell them. Because otherwise the deal won't be any good, because unless they have the blessing, the lease won't be valid, neither will the sales agreement, because you can shut them down. So thank you.
We have another.
Pardon me?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Does anyone else here present wish to speak on the formula business ordinance? Seeing no apparent interest, Sherry, do we yet have anyone with a raised hand
No,
online?
nope.
All right, then we're going to close the public comment portion of this public hearing and return to the commission for deliberation. Thoughts? Any other
Question.
issues to be
Just a
clarified?
question. Every business, every business needs a permit in town, don't they?
Business license, yes.
Business license. So you would
Business
be,
license, zone clearance.
you'd be checking that.
Correct. That's a
Okay,
part of our
so-
process.
And of course, if you didn't, Barbara would be out there checking it for us, so I think we don't need to worry about
There's
that.
checks and balances.
I don't think we need to worry about that aspect of things.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure about that.
I think that it would be useful if all the real estate agents and property managers were aware down to a gene level of the formula business ordinance. But I'm not sure that it's the city's requirement to make sure they are all aware of it. They should be aware of what's in the code.
I mean, there's a packet of
And-
information that
Yeah.
that I don't know that we've necessarily shared with these real estate companies that are local, but certainly it's something we've been thinking about offline.
Okay.
My point being that if someone comes to the front desk having already leased space for a retail function of some sort, and you tell them, sorry, you're a formula business and you can't get a business license here, then we're gonna have some very unhappy private parties to a transaction that took place before that request. But I'm not sure that it's the city's responsibility to make sure that everybody knows about it beforehand. So,
That would sound like an incompetent real estate agent.
I-
To me.
yeah.
Yeah,
somebody
or
who could
property
sue.
manager or whatever. That's right.
I've got my real estate license. Can I share something?
Do you mind if we reopen the public comment portion here?
That's fine.
Yeah, go for it.
All right,
Yeah.
we'll reopen it, but first, we'll hear from Bill Miley.
He's on 2.
Oh, on
Item
two,
two,
thank you,
okay.
thank you. Then please come forward, ma'am.
Thank you for letting me speak again, Bianca Rowe. So I have my real estate license, and when you're doing a transaction, what has happened at the moment is part of the disclosure requirement for agents. Specifically, you have to disclose about the lawsuit for water. So anybody buying any property has to know about the lawsuit because it's a pending litigation that they're taking on. So this particular issue of the ordinance or anything pertaining to commercial would technically fall on the disclosure that would pertain to the responsibility of the agency, not the city.
Like
Because it's
selling a
public.
house and somebody died there, you have to tell the new buyer.
Exactly. So because it's a disclosure issue, it wouldn't be a city liability. It's something that the city already has as public information. So it would be the due diligence of the party doing their own research and development, or if it's a particular lawsuit or something, then the real estate agency has to disclose it to the client.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
It's the responsible thing to do. I'm not sure that it's mandatory under the law, that's all. Okay, so,
We're in public and Larry has his hand.
Go ahead.
I too have my real estate license, not active here for commercial real estate, and almost to most, I want to say all, because that'll put me in trouble, most commercial real estate brokers, the offer will say, subject to getting any and all permits required to do business, any legal business that I want to do in the space.
okay.
And that's part of
And
the
if that
sales.
doesn't happen, then the lease doesn't go through.
Well, the lease is not perfected because you have a checklist of.
Right.
It's
Okay.
like buying a 24-hour car wash and having it only be 12 hours because you didn't get the prior approvals, which I understand happened. But that's another question, okay? But seriously, I mean, once you tell the owners of the building and say, look, somebody wants to come here, this is a new law, you get noticed anyway, because you're an owner, commercial property applies to you, or anything, it's incumbent upon the owner to now tell his agent. And if the agent doesn't know, and he's not doing his job, then he's at risk. So that's.
Okay.
Sounds like this is a job of the realty board, to inform their members.
All right, now we will reclose the public comment portion here. Yes, sir.
Oh, I did have a question for staff. On
That's
the-
good deliberation material.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah, on the attachment B, when we had the 17-member public engagement, I know that there was discussion around the online business nature, and just to confirm, it was decided that that would be too complicated to regulate or too complicated to understand, or I'm just.
I think it's a combination of the two. What we, at least in my research, and I think in the research of certain community members, it just became somewhat complicated in how it operates, how it functions. You know, taking potentially looking at a website counting as one seems odd because that's typically what most businesses already have. So then most businesses are already at one when they're already having a brick and mortar. So to one of the speaker's points, brick and mortar, mom and pop. That's
Okay.
really what it
So
boils
the
down
online
to.
presence doesn't count, that's just, okay, gotcha. All right.
I would say this, it's one of the things that we look at when we're doing our research on these businesses. It's the brick and mortar in other communities. So if they have an online presence, that doesn't count as one, but their online presence is one of the tools we use to identify where else they are located with brick and mortar.
Okay. I
And you can see whether they meet some of these criteria,
Nice.
such as
Correct.
same menus and all
Absolutely.
that stuff.
It's
That
one
would
of
be on the
it's one of the
website.
due diligence, absolutely. Someone had spoken to that earlier.
That
Look,
way you don't have to drive to all the places to look at them.
This is, yeah, The community members that are here tonight have been a part of this process, I would say, since the very beginning, since really kind of day one, even before the moratorium, even before discussing before the Planning Commission. They've been intimately involved in this, and that's the reason why you've got them here tonight. There were more members that were at the public input session in March, and even more as we first started this process. But they have been collectively here and providing necessary input and consistent with that input throughout. So, and I would say this body has been consistent in terms of asking the right questions and staff then going back and doing that research and bringing information back.
Yeah, because, I mean, we've had this ordinance for how long? It's been a long time.
The ordinance was first introduced in 2007, and we were lucky enough to have the individuals that were a part of that process in 2007 at the Community Input session in March, and had some conversations with them as well. So it's been in play since 2007. There were some minor revisions in 2011, 2012, and now we're looking at some additional hardening, if you will, some strengthening.
Broadening of the criteria, really, because
I think it's clarifying, if
including
anything.
retail and other things where it really, in 2007, it started as a reaction to Jersey Mike's when the city discovered that there were more Jersey Mike's out there.
Yeah, and to a certain degree, when this conversation first started, even before it went to council, when you started talking to community members, there was already an assumption it was either 5 or lower. And once we started unpacking that, no, it's not, it's actually more than 11, that's when I think the sweat beads started for some business community members out there saying, whoa, we've been telling people one thing, and like, no, the code reads this way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's probably where that's really kind of the root of where the conversation started and evolved from there.
Yeah, and historically, I mean, I grew up here, and I remember when McDonald's went in Miramani, and they wanted to come into downtown Ojai, but we had this ordinance. There's no franchises.
They were at one time in downtown Ojai.
Well, they tried to go in again, and they got pushed over to Miramani. Anyway, so this thing has been around. I think it's
A lot
part
of
of our
things did.
identity.
They
as a
couldn't have the
core-
arts.
Again,
Anything.
I want to just preface, I know we're having the conversation and I appreciate it. Let's stay away from using business names.
Yeah, sorry. Anyway, my point is that this has been part of the fabric of our community for a very long time, and it's nice to see it all the kinks getting ironed out, and I hope that this will lay the groundwork for.
Hope this is the last of the kinks.
Yes, I
Yeah,
hope this is the last of the kinks.
but may or may not be. I did have a couple of other questions, and maybe this is for staff, maybe it's for the city attorney. Attachment A, page 2, says that all of the recitals above, which is the history of this thing, are true and correct and incorporated by reference, fine. And section 2 has all the stuff that says why we don't have to go through any more hoops with CEQA. But I didn't find anywhere in the resolution that we recommend to the city council that they adopt Exhibit 1. Did I miss it? As it stands, the Planning Commission resolution, does, at least my reading, doesn't say that we recommend the city council adopt this draft ordinance. And if I read it correctly, then I would suggest that we amend the Planning Commission resolution to add that, perhaps as a section 3.
So,
Titles do not imply action.
yeah.
They're
Doesn't
simply for
section 2,
identification
the
purposes.
amendment, essentially say we're asking them to do that, to amend the ordinance
Where?
on, now therefore, the city council
So page,
of the city of Ojai does ordain
Which
the follows.
page?
Page 2.
He's on two.
Section 2, code amendment,
I'm sorry, this is page
Doesn't say
2 of
adopted.
Exhibit 1,
Attachment A.
attachment A,
page 2 of attachment. A.
is amended as follows.
Under CEQA guidelines, CEQA guidelines, CEQA guidelines,
Yeah, a lot of sequels.
uh,
Section
and
1.
all that is
We're looking at
appropriate
the
and
actual-
correct. I don't see a
This is the
recommendation
ordinance.
that
The
Exhibit
ordinance was-
1
You're
be
looking at the
adopted
other
by
one.
the city council.
Oh,
Right, it can be added, I think is probably the
I see,
simplest.
our resolution.
I would leave it
okay.
to the city
Resolution.
attorney to
And he's on,
tell us what the
Oh, okay.
appropriate words are, but I think
Section
we need something in there.
There can be, or a separate motion also, but since we have the resolution, probably amending is probably the best thing to do, so.
Well,
motion-
here's, before we do that, let's just make sure that we understand. The title says a resolution of the City of Ojai Planning Commission recommending that the city council approve an ordinance of the City of Ojai amending, and then it's identifying the amendment to 10-2.1713.
Right, okay.
And then if you look in the whereases, it then mentions Exhibit 1 as a part of this meeting, which then identifies within Section 1, the Planning Commission determines that the above set forth findings are true and correct, which then is incorporating the whereas, which I think is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The eighth whereas. So we're covering it under Section 1, which is the Exhibit 1, which is 2 of 3 of Attachment A. And then we're covering ourselves through Section 2, which is the CEQA stuff. So at least as far as I'm concerned, it meets the thresholds of what we've done previously. Even Title 10, most recently, we had a very similar format in terms of what we're looking at here. However, if you want to add a Section 3 to further clarify, I think that's kind of a belt and suspenders kind of approach too. I'm fine with that.
Lucas, while you're
Comments
looking
regarding this.
at this,
Oh, I see. For-
amending it,
Okay, for review and consideration by the city council. Comrade. Okay,
while you're correcting or not correcting.
So this is Exhibit 1 here, the one we're referencing, the first Section 1.
Exhibit 1 is the proposed ordinance for approval by the city council,
Correct.
the red line version.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
There's
we're
two
recommend-
pieces.
Recommendations to
So
them.
There's
we're
two
recommending
pieces.
that in Section 1, and it says, we're amending it. So I don't know whether we need any more than that.
Right. So you're taking forward
We found
a
it.
draft ordinance that the city council will then make final determination on, which is a part of the process. It's
Okay,
required
would
to
you
come to this
correct
body
the
first.
spelling of criteria in the title? Fifth line.
Back to
The
that.
whereases are absolutely, if once a teacher, just stuck there always.
Criteria?
That's that one.
It is interesting when you do all caps, it doesn't do autocorrect.
Uh-oh, you gotta have
Oh,
someone
it
read
assumes
those
it's an
things.
acronym and leaves it alone. Okay,
Okay.
very good. That's all I had.
Me too. I would like to say that the March meeting that I attended was very informative, being rather new on the scene, and that had the group wound up at a lower number, like 4 or 3, I would have gone with that as well. But it seems like 5 is where we are, and I approve of it.
Now, just to
Is
clarify.
that a motion?
Are you making a
Well,
No, no, I'm not touching it. No, I'm just applauding the meeting and saying I agree with those people who were trying to get it down.
I want to compliment our community development director for running a excellent meeting with a lot of different viewpoints and some offline problems.
Herding cats comes to mind.
And I just thought he really did a really good job of that. Secondly, last night, we had a suggestion about some kind of element in our general plan about tourism being compatible with small-town character
And the residential.
and residential. But the small-town character, I would say this ordinance is a perfect example of actually doing that, you know? So that is, you know, I don't know if we need an element to do it, but this is an example of us passing an ordinance which is making our tourism compatible with our small-town character and our small businesses, I would say. So I
Yeah, the second whereas within the ordinance, the draft ordinance itself, I think does
Yeah,
a good
yeah,
job
yeah,
of
yeah.
covering that, yeah.
So we're on our way on that element already.
Do we need a motion?
I think we need a motion.
I'll move that we approve the draft resolution
There's not a number on it. Do we,
23.
23 something?
There's not a number until it's
It'll be
been,
numbered when it gets to the city council. It's
Okay.
their
No.
ordinance, it's their resolution number.
The resolution presented us with the change in the spelling of criteria. I would recommend that we approve that and send it on to the city council.
Second.
Very good.
All right.
Any discussion of the motion? Then Sherry, let's have a roll call on item 1, please.
Quillisi,
Yes,
Trent,
Yes.
Murphy,
Yes.
Starkweather.
Yes.
terrific. There you are.
Done.
Yes. Yes. You're clapping for the director, not for the commission.
yeah, we did.
Oh, I don't know.
These guys.
Looking at Lucas.
We had to twist his arm.
We appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Good work.
Okay.
Okay. On to 2.
This thing,
Good night.
I'd like to add my compliments. This thing could have had another 50 clauses in it to deal with all of the things that came out in all of the meetings. And you distilled it to the essential pieces. And we now have something that I think accomplishes what pretty much everybody wanted to accomplish with this, so thank you.
Yeah,
That
we
was
tried
a
to
lot of-
avoid
That was a
the-
lot of work getting down to just what we had.
yeah, we tried to avoid the rabbit holes and really kind of focus on some of that deeper dive stuff, which was the questions that came up from the public and from this body, so.
Yeah.
And from, actually from council as well. Council had some questions as well, so.
It's very hard to take a difficult topic like that and to make it simple, and you guys did that. So,
It is highly complicated. You're looking at large cities, medium cities, small cities. and
So
they've all
one
got
of the things that was brought up by Larry Steingold, Mr. Steingold, sorry, was about notifying people. And I had even attendees that are here tonight ask me about the conditional use provision. They weren't even aware that there was such a thing. So that's something that a realtor should know in case there's somebody who's coming in who would like to be an exception. Or certainly the chamber should know, because they talked about trying to recruit some businesses that may fall under this category that we don't have. I don't remember which ones they were, but,
Yeah, I mean, it boils down to the always encouraging, and I recently spoke at a real estate, with a real estate group, just to get them up to speed with, and have them ask a variety of questions. I had an understanding of what their questions were, but then obviously it went beyond that. And that was fine. I mean, they were asking everything under the moon, including the formula business stuff that we just talked about. And there was some stuff that they weren't aware of. There was some stuff that they already knew. They were educating me. They were saying stuff that I was like, you're correct. You know what I mean? Like they were.
Here's the impact of this part of your code.
Yeah, exactly. So to that point, getting out and keeping that particular body of the community informed and up to date, I think is critical. Having some sort of a packet of information is something I know I've talked internally with staff about developing. We've already got a packet of information we give when people come to the counter. Getting that to those individuals that are going out and reaching out, like the brokers and whatnot, is an option. I mean, we've already got it available. It's simply just having them come pick it up if they're going to go meet with somebody is easy enough.
Well, if you sent one package to the Realty Board
Yeah. Yeah, because it's not like something where
Worry about it from there.
it's not like it's not like we're having to create it. The pieces are already created.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just
If and
distribution.
when the city council approves this, that'll all be published anyway, won't it?
It will. However,
They
Not
won't,
everybody
they won't write about the conditional use permit
watching.
portion. Guarantee that. That's too much in the weeds for them.
I don't want to get into to the weeds on some of this stuff.
Can I make one suggestion?
The case is over, but, yes.
Suggestion? It's an opportunity, I'm sorry, it's an opportunity for the city planning to meet every tenant and meet every owner of every building in the city. When you go and give them this, by the way, it's an opportunity to go see the commercial properties in the city. Because you just go out and you knock on the door and you say, hi, and this is the new, and we want to meet you, and who are you, and welcome that we haven't been here. It's an opportunity to gather all the information on all your commercial properties.
Understanding that any changes that the city council approves here will affect future actions.
Oh, I understand, but you get to meet every real estate agent, every property manager, every owner, because it applies to every commercial property in the state, and there's only a city, and there's 182, whatever. And you meet them, and this gives you an opportunity to gather all your data and all your information on every tenant, so you could use it for economic development and other things, so just an opportunity. Anyway.
So when
Like advanced planning stuff.
the chamber has supposedly a charge, and I've talked to some people about that, of diversifying business, and it was brought up here, I don't know if it was this meeting or the other one, about there were some businesses that might need a conditional use permit. So they should understand what the criteria is before they go out and start recruiting somebody.
I mean, it's one of those, we could have a conversation with Jamie Fleming as well.
Yeah.
That's easy enough.
Probably useful. Okay, let's move on to our discussion item. City Council adopted housing element programs and a report regarding the Housing Action Plan. Please go ahead, staff.
Good evening, Chair.
This
And
is Alex doing this one. Yeah,
yes, sir.
okay.
You know, if there's colored graphs, I'm not far away.
That's
Can I ask a question before we proceed? Is he gonna go through the entire thing? Or are we gonna go at each one of these and, because I've got questions about a lot of them.
Let's have Alex go through it, and then, then we can ask the
Okay.
questions, and then we can have,
Sure.
this is a discussion item and not a public
We're
hearing
not
item,
voting
so-
on anything
Oh, I
tonight.
know, but I just want to understand things better.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a great segue, Commissioner, because I'm aiming to distill and kind of break down a lot of what you're seeing in this graph. So let's start from the very beginning. Yeah. So the purpose for presenting this item to the Commission today is I'm going to do three things. First is I'm going to break down the action plans programs into categories for you guys. Second, I aim to update the Commission on the action plans progress. So that's each of those programs. And then thirdly, we're here to take any recommendations from you all as far as and feedback on the progress that we've made thus far. So Lucas will fill in a lot of those blanks in terms of the progress each of those programs have made. And so what I have to do is kind of give at least a 30,000-foot view of what's happening. So again, as Lucas mentioned, we're not aiming to amend or adjust or add to these programs tonight. The goal is just to update and to allow the Commission to understand where the city is in its timeline. Okay. So to briefly summarize how we got here, City Council adopted the housing element in October of 2021. It was then sent to the California Department of Housing and Community Development, otherwise known as HCD, for certification. And then HCD requested additional clarification and revisions to complete the element, from which staff took for consideration in January of 2022. In December of 2022, staff presented their revisions to City Council, and City Council made a motion to adopt those measures. Staff then once again sent HCD the latest element with those measures that were adopted to HCD in December of 2022. from which staff received another response from HCD with more requested revisions in February of this year. So to date, staff is still working through those latest comments that HCD gave to us in February of this year, 2023.
Is that the one that's online? Okay.
So within the housing element, chapters 2, 3, and 4 evaluate the city's housing needs, constraints, and opportunities, while Appendix A presents a review of the previous element. Within Chapter 4, however, is the action plan. And what the action plan does, and consequently what this Excel sheet does, is set forth the city's goals, policies, and programs to address the identified housing needs and issues for the 2021 to 2029 planning period. So there are 19 programs that have been identified to this effect, and those 19 programs are in the Excel sheet.
Yeah.
So,
So are we 2 years into this?
More than that.
Yeah, this body has actually been discussing this for longer than 2
Well, I
years.
meant we're 2 years into our cycle.
But 2 years into the 2021. So the 2021 to 2029, this is the sixth cycle of the housing element. This body reviewed it. Certain members weren't on here. Certain members were actually at the podium having conversations and providing input at the time. Regardless, everybody's at the table now. And this isn't meant to be a piece where we're looking for revisions. This is really kind of a, hey, this is what we're faced with. This is how we're going to be potentially addressing this moving forward. There's some. Are you still presenting? Or? Go ahead. Okay. There are some items that we're doing at staff level, kind of a cursory face value piece. And there's pieces that are going to be coming before this body within these 19 programs. When I say this body, I mean as a recommendation body, then moving forward to city council, just like we had with a previous item. And then there's items that don't have a set date, but there are kind of like from a monitoring standpoint, and we have certain requirements. So within HCD, we all know that there's the annual progress report that we have for the housing element, and then there's the annual progress report we have for the general plan. Both of those are required to be submitted by April 1st. We've met the deadline for this year for that, but it's every year. Within that APR, or annual progress report, we're also required to provide the progress on each of these 19 programs. City Council's adopted it. HCD has yet to certify it. Regardless, we need to start working on these because they do have dates. Some of those dates have actually we've blown those dates, but we don't have a certified housing element at this point. We're still working towards those because the revisions that we're potentially seeing at this point aren't adding or removing any of these programs, aren't adding new ones, aren't removing the ones that we're seeing here. So we need to start moving forward. So that we can start getting credits for some of the work that we're starting to do.
You're saying we don't have any deadlines set in stone
There's deadlines that are identified within the housing element.
other than within the 8-year period.
Within the 8-year period is what we're looking to have.
53 in the 8 years.
Oh,
And-
you're talking about that's RENA.
So the-
Regional, that's separate from we're focusing on the programs, things that are, that HCD and staff and the consultant and council for that matter, and this body have identified as items that need to either be addressed or maintaining consistently with state law.
So we
Just-
promised to do these things as getting agreement from ACD. And it looks to me, except for one, this is a joint responsibility of the Community Development Department and the Planning Commission, because that's what they all say.
Yes. So, yes, and that's why this is coming
So
before this
before we
body.
do an annual report, it seems like our board should review them because we're responsible for them.
So the APR does not require it to go to Planning Commission beforehand,
The-
but the annual progress report.
Oh.
It only requires it to go to City Council, and that's identifying the progress. However, there is ample opportunity throughout this cycle for us to be coming forward and saying, hey, out of these 19 programs, this, program 6 is moving in this direction. Program 4 is moving in this direction. Oh, what's going on with program 8? Oh, guess what? This is what happened with program 8. Or we're holding off on that one because we're focusing all of our effort. Remember, the body of maintaining and bringing forward these items consists of Alex or myself. We don't have a full team, a full room of people that are working on these. There's a lot of work involved in each of these for the most part, and monitoring and updating and graphs. And so there's a lot of background
Good thing
work.
we have 8 years to get it done.
Yeah, we have the time to do it, but we also want to make sure we're being thoughtful about how we do that as well.
Sure.
So,
And the city council is looking to the planning commission to make sure we do it, as well as the community development department.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So we should, as commissioners, when we are aware of things either getting ahead of a schedule or falling behind a schedule, it's appropriate to ask questions of staff and review these programs as appropriate.
Yeah, I agree. It's a checks and balances to a certain degree. I will say in previous cities that I've worked in, these programs were, for the most part, ignored. And I would say to a certain degree, the 5th cycle, when I was looking at reviewing this, most of the programs during that 5th cycle weren't necessarily ignored, but just weren't being completed. HCD is taking a much harder line with a lot of their government code that they've adopted recently through Assembly bills and Senate bills, which is putting more of a, it's a shall. Come on, guys, it's a shall, right? So, and that's why I think it's more important for us to get ahead of this rather than looking at 2027 and saying, oh, geez, there's 19 programs and we've not even looked at them at this point. So
I feel personal responsibility as being appointed and being asked about this when I was appointed, and having people ask me in the community to monitor this and make sure that we do it. So I take it personally as a responsibility.
And a point of clarity, just for me.
or professionally, right? Like
Professionally, well,
These programs, were these recommended by us, city council, director, or was this something that ACD recommended to us?
So HCD has kind of generic programs, but then you start looking at for some of these, they actually are addressing barriers or inconsistencies with code. The density bonus is an example. Our density bonus rules are out of date. I was just looking at those the other day and started working with before Alex was here, but have started working with Alex to a certain degree on this density bonus piece. ADU law is another one that's identified in here. We've started working on that and have started internalizing that, which will be coming forward. That's another one of our programs.
And those kinds of things will result in code changes, which we will review and recommend to.
Yeah, so it's not like they're coming out of left field. They're a part of the programming. Right. So, and then another example, it's kind of a bigger picture piece, is the objective versus subjective standards. We're looking at those currently, and looking at other cities for some kind of advice as well.
But Lucas, if I can add, that's your previous point, Chair, about the code changes. That's a great point because there are 9 programs that require us going through city council and having those things recommended and approved. So
Yeah, and
there's
obviously through
another
this body
process.
first.
There's, just talking about your point of not waiting until 2027. If that were to happen, we would not make this because of all those programs that require that formal process.
Right.
So
Right,
Yeah.
great.
Okay, cool.
can I add something, because we're talking about subjective, and I happen to have read the Housing Accountability Act Technical Assistance Advisory, page 7. And this is objective development standards. I didn't realize this until I read it. So it mentions subjective standards, that we need to change those to be objective, but it also states, let me find it here. Local governments that deny a project due to, no, that's the wrong place. No. Oh, in addition, this is in addition to the subjective standards. Objective standards that do apply should make it feasible for the developer to build the density allowed by the zoning and not constrain a local government's ability to achieve its RENA housing targets. So, and examples of objective standards could be height, could be minimum lot size, could be parking requirements.
Setbacks.
Yeah, so we can make them objective, but we have to also look at whether or not they're unreasonably denying the ability to have sufficient number of housing units. So it's actually goes beyond just subjective, it goes into the objective too.
Can we finish with Alex's presentation now?
Ma'am, I think it's done. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's other things, but I think
Kinda
Lucas did a great
cut
job
you
of
off.
bookending that. No problem at all. Thank you.
No, once we have finished with clarifying questions for staff, then we'll take public comment.
Okay.
Are we through there?
So we're not gonna go through all these tonight?
If you want to, we can. We have 19 programs. If you want to go one by one, we can certainly do that too.
We can at least briefly discuss what's going on.
Yeah, I'd like to understand some of them.
I would rather us do that after public comment.
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine.
As a
Okay.
part of deliberations.
Yep,
yeah.
part of deliberation.
Cool.
Thank you.
Right,
Because these color
Okay.
codes are really good.
okay. So let's start, open the public comment portion of this item. And we have one card for a speaker, Bill Miley.
They're all watching you on TV, Bill.
See, nobody opposes this element.
The housing A-team is here. Please proceed.
That's right.
Apparently, only two of us, okay. Okay, Bill Miley. I have reproduced in my email the goals and accomplishments from the chart, especially ADU. I am very critical of what we are doing about ADUs to make them our affordable results. So here are some of my questions and comments. But first I want to see if I can preempt anything coming back from your commission that seems to disregard everything I have to say. Cabrillo is in the process of developing a 50-unit, low-income farm worker development next to Whispering Oaks, which some of us hoped we could get to expand senior stuff, but it didn't work out. Okay, I want to make sure that you don't comment by saying Cabrillo will fill our RENA numbers for low income. This is what I understand is happening with Cabrillo, because it's not on this agenda yet.
We don't know anything about it. We never heard of it.
Cabrillo, I believe, is using special state funds to deal with special needs, farm workers and very low income, extremely low income folks. And because of that, they get special review by the state and minimizes the role that the city government has in approving this project. Similar to what they're doing in Miramonte, because they're working on special needs unhoused people. And we have the law that may happen here sometime, if I can make it happen. Okay. Number one, by city ordinance, there's no control over rental charges for ADUs, if any rent is charged. It will be impossible to determine affordability. So how can you meet this goal? Because you can't count it. And to have you say something like, well, it's affordable by design. That may have been true in the past, But you can't say that anymore because people rent apartments for $2,000 or maybe one bedroom. So I don't think you can prove that anymore. So I believe you can't say that to meet this goal. So this goal is almost impossible to meet. 2, since ADU structures can be small, garage conversion up to 1,200 square feet, the sizes of the ones that are being built should be publicly reported to show what we're accomplishing. Maybe they're all studios. We should publicly know that. In my opinion, ADUs are not readable affordable units, as they are not date deeded, 55 years, they're not rent controlled, and they're not suitable for growing families. Why are we emphasizing ADUs when working families need larger spaces and predictable rents? And 3, by stressing ADUs, our cities is failing to seek and support affordable housing, which is 55-year deeded, guaranteed. Where's that goal? More effort should be spent on facilitating truly affordable housing, which is date deeded and focused on low income and extremely low income households. We're not doing that, folks. We should feel bad about that at 2 a.m. when we wake up. Anyway, I do. Okay.
Thank you.
Got another card coming.
Let's have your card, sir.
Yeah.
Larry Steingold, Ojai. I disagree with Bill. We have the goal of getting lower rents, and whatever we can do to lower rents for people who live in Ojai, we should do. If Cabrillo is going to build efficiencies, which is essentially a one-bedroom, and that's considered affordable, then an ADU is considered affordable because they're about the same size. So they can all be tracked. They all have to get permits to build. They all have to get permits to do this. And if we require a certain number of ADUs to be affordable, then you draw a line someplace and you say, listen, we have 200 ADUs and 50 of them have to be affordable, and that's how it happens. Otherwise, we stop permitting ADUs. Somehow. I mean, there's a way to get around all this stuff. It just takes a little will and a little effort. And is it lower rent or more units? I mean, so we can discuss that, but.
Well, that process goes to telling an individual landlord, you may not rent at market rate with this structure you just built.
Which is what is happening. Okay, we already have lost sovereignty on SB 9 and SB 10. We're losing sovereignty everywhere else. So it's going to get to a point where the state's going to say, listen, we don't care what you build. 30% have to be whatever. So I mean, we either have to do it voluntarily, or somebody says we need this, and or you give benefits, or you give discounts, or you give incentives. No property tax. Call it a nonprofit. There's a way to get people to do something that they really don't want to do. And if it's economics, it's essentially money. You figure out how to get it done. What convinces people to have lower rent or fixed rent? If you guarantee an investor fixed rent for 55 years, he may say, hey, that's not such a bad deal, because you've got a straight stream, there's no negotiation, there's no big deal. It's your rent is $2,000 a month, and it goes up 4% every year, and you get all the pass-throughs and whatever you do, and that's it. And you call it fixed, affordable. Okay. You call it whatever you need, whatever it takes, if that's the requirement. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question and make a comment?
Still in.
Oh, we still,
Public comment.
We're
we have more
still in-
public comments?
I don't know.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Sherry, do we have anyone with a raised hand?
No.
Okay. Then we will close the public comment portion of this discussion item and
A couple of questions and then
deliberate.
a comment. Are we keeping track of all the ADUs as to what their rental prices are?
Rental, no. No.
So how do we categorize those as moderate and count them towards our arena numbers?
It's actually simple. The state's allowed us to do that, regardless of what the cap is for
So they
for
just
rent.
say it's moderate.
Correct. If we try to go lower, that's where the burden of proof then lies.
Yeah.
So it used to be, before 2017, we couldn't even do that. That literally trying to get it within an affordable category required due diligence in terms of us reaching out to those individuals, identifying what the rent was.
So if the state allows that, would it also, though, make sense for us to kind of know what is happening with this? Like do surveys, not require anybody, but just to get some sense of, how much these are going for?
It's interesting. We typically ask, and most decline to provide
Yeah,
information.
I can understand that, but
What I think I heard you say just a moment ago is the state has said that an ADU is affordable housing
At a moderate
by
level.
decree at a moderate level.
Correct.
Okay, so it doesn't matter what rent is charged on an ADU, the state considers it moderate affordable housing.
Yeah, unless they come in and someone willingly identifies through us asking and them coming back and saying, you know what, we're actually renting this to, I'll just give a generic response. My grandparents are renting it at $400 a month. And then we look at that and we say, okay, great. Let's see where that plugs into the affordable. I haven't had one of those cases yet in this city. I have had it in others where I've been able to plug that in, provide the information, and get credit for it. But not in this city
so
yet.
can I?
But that's a voluntary
It
setting
is voluntary, not
of
required.
a rent. It is not a 55-year term guaranteed with
Yeah,
adjustments to the area median income and all that stuff.
correct. Because it also requires within the annual progress report for us to then check the box, is it deed restricted? If it's deed restricted, then how long is it deed restricted for? Is it 55 years? Is it 10 years?
Now
We've got to begin to give a lot of information, clarifying information to justify it.
we can find out if things are deed restricted. Don't they have to file those with the?
If it's deed restricted, it'll be in the deed, and you can ask them at the county, and you can find
Yeah,
out.
we could find out
Yeah, that's
which ones
public
are deed
information.
restricted. I can't imagine someone doing it, but
Voluntarily,
yeah.
I have yet to see one done here.
So
my term.
I wasn't talking about you asked them to publicly make the information available, but to do it anonymously, that you surveyed people, said, we just trying to get a sense of what the field's going on here, because social scientists do this all the time and get information. They just say, this is not going to be publicized under your house, but we're just trying to get a sense of what these are going for.
Right.
So I think that would be useful information to know. A survey, okay. The second thing is, I saw several academic stuff that looked at ADUs, and basically, in San Francisco and other places, they found that they're not affordable housing, and they're mostly not moderate either.
They're only legally affordable.
That we're allowing the I can see why the state did that, because it encourages us to do ADUs. Now, I would say one other thing, from a supply and demand economic standpoint, it does help provide more supply, which can restrain the rise in rentals. So in that sense, it is an affordable strategy. And it gives people income, and then they can let their relatives live there and that sort of thing. So it's a good thing. It's just that we need to be clear about what it's doing and what it's not doing.
Look, I think everybody understands that ADUs have evolved over the last 25 years. I mean, jeepers. 25 years ago, they were conditional use permits, so you just weren't seeing them at all. Like, no one was touching them. And when you were, they were coming before this body, and they were the rooms were full. My very first meeting in another city, when I first moved here from Iowa, I was surprised at how many people showed up for an ADU. By the way, I didn't even know what an ADU was. Coming from the Midwest out to here, you have no idea what that is, right? And to see the scrutiny coming from, I mean, just people frothing at the mouth for ADUs. Like, what are you doing? You're ruining our neighborhood. And now they're just, it's a plan check. It's a,
I do
saying
hear
too much.
complaints.
No.
but the reality is that
Complaints from neighbors. I've heard
the
some.
barriers have been literally just torn down.
Yeah.
Right.
And the state recognizes that it's a process and it's an opportunity to provide one piece of a type of housing.
The only thing I would say on just one other thing, people who argue, well, we shouldn't allow an affordable housing apartment complex on this street. You know, there's going to be all this traffic. But think about every ADU is adding a car to that street. So a street that has, 30 houses and 10 of them are ADUs, you've really added to. I'm not saying we shouldn't. I think that's because if you drive down, most of our streets are so damn wide, you could put parties on them every night and you wouldn't be in the way. But yes, I just think when you make that argument against traffic, then you should be consistent with ADUs.
Okay. Can we briefly review if you have a question, go ahead.
No,
Then I'd like to briefly review the 19 programs.
Yeah, I just wanted
on.
to quickly comment on attachment B, page 5 of 16. One of the programs is facilitating affordable housing development. And I just want the public to know that it outlines clearly what the city can and can't do.
Page what did you say?
Page 5.
Page 5, attachment B. So there's
number
one-
6.
Yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet points. So we can help with preparation of drawings. We can analyze the development. We can look at financial statements. They can fast track the environmental review. They can utilize the police powers and local control, can provide appropriate land use and zoning, which we've done. Supporting applications submitted through funding agencies. But I really wanted to look at this last one, providing direct financial or development assistance when feasible. So I wanted to elaborate on that one a little bit to see what type of direct financial assistance we have, if we have any, and zero. And is that something that we are looking towards in the future? Because to our speakers and some of the comments that we hear from the general public is that we need to have some sort of funding available, because really this all comes down to dollars. And as a city, if we have some sort of community trust, some sort of land trust, where we can participate and help with either rental assistance, or we can help with purchasing properties and making those available at lower cost than market, then that's something that other cities have done. So I was just curious on that bullet point, what we're trying to accomplish.
Can I add to that question? Because on page 13, it also seems to be a question about, in page 13, H10, the city will promote the cooperative repair, rehabilitation, and improvement of residential structures, etc. And I'm wondering where the money is for that. And it sounds like it's in the same obscure pot.
Well, I think promote sounds a lot like encourage, but not contribute financially to.
Right.
But yeah, providing direct financial and development assistance when feasible. So
Well,
Yeah.
we are part of
It's-
the Ventura County Housing Trust Fund.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which we have given money for.
Yes, and they do also have a land trust. I know the city of Oxnard and the city of Thousand Oaks. I went to their annual meeting, so that's why I know this, online.
Yeah.
That those two cities are the only ones in Ventura so far who donated land, there was city land, and they are a cooperative with nonprofits. So they put the packages together.
We tried to do that.
So we have.
Didn't we, Bill?
That is a resource, you know, and others as well. So we can, how should I say it? We can leverage other resources without the city actually forking through the money, although some of it is you're going to buy the land. The other thing is that I wish we could get a clear understanding of under what circumstances we could have a, like a, what's it called, a tax on, what is it, on sale of houses? What's that tax called?
Whenever a house is sold and
Transfer tax, yes.
It's
Some
called
places-
the documentary transfer tax.
There is one already, I think.
Right. So how this usually works is it's a multi-agency process where there is one and that the city can increase it to a certain percentage. So
There's one in Ojai.
I'm not sure there's one. I haven't looked at this. I looked at
I
it
don't
for,
think-
for another.
'cause,
Usually it's set at, I think, 0.5%.
I don't think there is. I'll have to look
At
into that a little
Summers,
bit
when
more.
we
Right.
brought this up at a city council meeting, and maybe you could check with his office, because he said, well, there's real limits because we're not a charter city.
Right. Well,
So I would like to know what exactly, because people keep talking about it, that, oh, we could do, you know, a land transfer tax to raise money. So
not a land transfer. Right. So it's a property.
property transfer, that's
tax,
what I mean.
documentary transfer
Property
tax.
transfer. And usually you do it over a certain amount. I think it's 5 million in Los Angeles. We would probably want a lower figure. But you're trying to hit the, you know, really wealthy places. And so it would be useful if we're going to think about this as a source of these resources that are mentioned in this section or the other section. What we could do with that? What's the possibility?
Yeah, so you're talking about a way in which to generate revenue that they can be plugged back into
Yeah.
to the local
And
economy
that
and be
one
earmarked
makes-
specifically for
Yeah, and I
housing.
think that one makes, of course, I have nothing wrong with using a TOT and raising it either, but this one, when you're doing a housing transfer tax, that's directly related to housing, so it's makes more sense, it seems to me, to,
And in our community, I think there's a general concern of displacement. There's a general concern of gentrification. And, you know, those are hard problems to solve. But a lot of it just comes down to they need some financial assistance somehow, some way, whether that's government supported, whether it's public, private, whatever. So if we can, and a lot of it is also help the folks that are in Ojai. Well, that's great. We can build affordable housing, but we can't build it just for Ojai people. That's against the law. That's discrimination. And I think the public needs to know that. If we build affordable housing in Ojai, it can't be just for Ojai people. It can be part of, but it can't be.
well, there's a new bill that is giving you some rights there.
No, that's.
Let's not get bogged down in the details, but I think the outline that Commissioner Trent is outlining is correct.
In general.
In
yes.
general, it's correct.
There's some carve outs there, but I don't want to get into
Right,
it.
it's-
But
yeah, thank you.
However, if we had some sort of financial assistance available and a resident from Ojai came in and applied for it, they could potentially get that funds and they could apply it. That's where we control it.
I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding of how economics work and distance. I can't imagine someone who's living in Oxnard, who's working in Oxnard, is going to come here to get affordable housing. That just doesn't make any sense.
Well, we have, just so you guys know, we have 162 assisted units currently today that are very low and low income housing. We have Whispering Oaks, Montgomery Oaks, we have Section 8,
Yeah.
we have Sycamore Homes. Now, people apply from all over the county to go there. There's people on wait lists for Whispering Oaks that are from all over the county. So it's not just folks from Ojai.
Those are seniors, aren't they?
It doesn't have, no, not, well, Whispering Oaks, I think, is for seniors, yes. Montgomery Oaks is
Section
not.
8. Yeah.
Yeah, Montgomery Oaks is not.
So it could be people from Oxnard that are facing high rent in Oxnard.
Correct.
And they come up
They
here
apply.
and commute back to Oxnard to work.
They must be getting that through the Housing Authority, the information, because we don't have to advertise there.
No, they get it, yeah, they get it from the Housing Authority, they also get it from Cabrillo directly, they could go to Cabrillo and get it directly there, but, Yeah, so,
Yeah. And
FYI.
it would be wonderful if the city had money to help people.
yeah.
At the moment, the city is underwater on a number of its accounts, and there are deficits in the reserves, there's deficits in pensions, and,
Roads.
well, in roads, yeah. But I
The
think
reality is that, now there was an ordinance that I cannot remember the name of the ordinance off the top of my head, but it's an ordinance that requires, I'm having the city attorney look into it a little bit more, that requires when you build that you're then required to either provide a certain dollar amount, or if you ever end up selling those affordable units before the 55-year term, then the city gets a portion of those monies. I cannot remember the name of the ordinance itself. I've seen it in other cities. It's been wildly successful. It then creates a coffer account for affordable housing, and it's a great resource, and it builds over time. You monitor, and then you can then reuse those, earmarked obviously for affordable housing in the future, where the city can then begin to partner with other groups outside of the grants and the tax credits that come from the state and the county.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. If you're saying under this sort of an ordinance, if a developer built a certain number of residential units and agreed to deed restrict them below market rate.
Well, it wouldn't be
Then-
agreed. It would be a part of the ordinance that you would be required after 6 units. You're required then to provide a certain percentage of affordable housing. And then those affordable housing units are then earmarked. And in the future, if they ever come back and sell those units for sale, mind you, that a portion of that proceeds goes back into the city's coffers. I cannot remember the name of the ordinance off the top of my head here, but there's a term for it. I'm just not remembering it right now.
A specialty tax on sale of affordable housing?
Well, I don't want to call it a tax per se, but it's a reimbursement for a
percentage.
promise that you were going to maintain that affordability level for 55 years. You take
you're
away
saying if you abrogate that offering of a 55-year deed restriction, then you owe some money?
correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have some questions about this section if we're going to stick
Yeah,
on
I
it.
had another question on another section, but you can go ahead.
Well, we're on number 6,
Yeah.
so
Oh,
I
I was
wanted to
gonna
kind
move
of
on.
finish that before we
Yeah, no, go ahead.
go on to
ahead.
something
I
else.
haven't heard number 1 yet.
Yeah.
I know.
jumped-
I
jumped
thought we
to
didn't even
6.
start with number 1. I thought we were going to go 1 through 19.
I thought we were too, but somebody
I-
jumped the
I jumped
shark,
the
as
gun.
they
Oh,
say.
you did. That's right.
So I'm going to do it. We might as well finish it out while we're here.
Yeah, no, yeah, okay.
Okay. So as part of our review of barriers, I see a couple of them here. I find the density up to 20 units per acre a barrier, be honest with you, because when you're doing 2-story apartments, you can get a lot more than 20 units in an acre. And if I've saw a garden apartment advertised, someone was developing it, and they got like 26 units in an acre.
If
These
you
were
can
just single size.
describe the garden apartment scenario, if you could, please. What do you mean when you say there's terms and phrases? I know, like
Well, they
acronyms
used the
that
term, they looked like, little cottages, I guess, and they had gardens around them, and they were like, I think they were
courtyard is what you're
attached.
talking about?
Individual structures?
Yeah, they had 26. This was somebody, I don't know the site I was looking at, but it was given an example
6
of,
individual structures on an acre?
on 1 acre, yes. Well, it depends how small the units are and if they're attached.
And how small the gardens are.
Yeah, well, garden apartment means the whole area is around a garden. They maybe have 1 garden. I don't know. But anyway, I think it's worth looking at sort of standards.
I think you're
for-
going to get some pushback from Ojai community if
It's-
you
doesn't-
try and stack more than 20 apartments onto an acre.
The question is not whether Ojai is going to push back. The question is, under our agreement with HCD, have we removed a barrier? I mean, it's Ojai decides, well, we're just going to make everything a barrier, then we're not following what we've agreed to do. So they may be, I don't know what the amount would be reasonable, but
The reasonable amount is meeting the minimum density that's been identified per the code. So that is, I mean, there are potential.
Maximum density.
What did I say? Maximum density. Thank you. So it's meeting that provision without requiring a density bonus. Meaning, if all you can get with our current standards, you know, the parking and the setbacks and the outdoor living, if we have that as a standard, lot size, lot density that we were just talking about. If a developer comes in and on a 1 acre lot, they're allowed to do up to, let's say they're allowed to do up to 15. It's not within the overlay, hypothetically. They're allowed to do up to 15, but they come in, they're like, hey, with all your standards, we can only get to 12. But guess what? We can do a density bonus that gets us there. The state's looking at that and saying, well, hold on a second, asterisk. The density itself should be at the maximum of 15 before the density bonus. Where the old rules were, oh, as long as you got a density bonus, that'll get you to the density that you're looking for and then potentially beyond. The rules have slightly adjusted over the last couple of years with some recent changes in the law and in terms of how HCD is reviewing some of this. So it's a slight pivot for HCD in terms of the review. And we're accommodating and adjusting as necessary.
but you're dealing with someone who's coming in with a proposal. Part of what we're supposed to be doing is looking at these standards to begin with and see whether or not they are barriers.
Absolutely, as a part of one of the programs. I don't know.
Are you suggesting some other?
I'm suggesting we look
Standard
at it.
density?
I don't know. I'm suggesting that we should I just quickly was going online to look at what different communities have and what their projects were and how many units you can get normally in a 2-story apartment complex, for an example. And we're not talking about 3 stories here, talking about 2 stories.
5 stories.
It seemed like you could get more than 20. And since we're trying to maximize
And
density
if
for.
20 is the base allowance, and you get a density bonus because some amount of that 20 is affordable and deed restricted, then you get more than 20.
I know, but it just what Lucas was saying is that we should put the maximum at, what is a doable thing, and then the density, the bonus goes above that. So we shouldn't have to get a density bonus to get to what you would normally need to be economically viable, it seems to me. And I don't know, because as you talk to a lot of people in the construction business, they're telling me you can't build affordable housing because the cost per square foot is just beyond.
It's like $500 a
So
square foot.
part of what we're trying to do is help with that cost per square foot by allowing more units in a denser space. That's not causing any more traffic. It would cause, if we took it over 2 acres, we're talking about the same number of units. The question is, maximizing our.
It's not causing more traffic, you just said.
I said if you had did it over 2 acres, the same number of units, you're using up more land and more
Then you've got
concrete and
half
so
the
forth.
density.
Yeah. And we have a limited number of lots in the downtown area where we can put things.
We have a limited number of vacant lots throughout the city. I mean,
Yes.
those are shrinking by the year.
I'm just saying I'm not saying that we should change it. I was just saying that's something that we ought to look at. The other one, it says here, under SB 35, streamlined review of affordable housing projects. So it seems like that's something we need to look at, if there's a way to do that.
Absolutely.
There was an interesting ordinance I saw in San Diego it was very complicated, but it was.
It's a larger city.
That's true, but they had a specific ordinance just for streamlining affordable housing units. So maybe we can find other smaller cities that.
Yeah, larger cities like like San Diego or San Francisco or LA or Riverside, they're not necessarily looking at vacant lots. They're looking at underutilized. So if there's already buildings on that, they're looking at, well, how can we build up,
Yeah.
right? So they lift the lid on a lot of the standards that they're looking at. Those are much larger cities that have more complex standards than I care to even think about. We're a much smaller city, so we're thinking, how do we maximize the vacant lots that we currently have, right? And any underutilized sites that we currently have, how do we maximize those to the levels that currently exist within our objective?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the review, the streamline review part of it.
Yeah.
Because most developers I talk to and people who are interested in that sort of thing say one of the biggest costs is how long it takes to do things.
Sure, yeah.
And that's one of the complaints I constantly hear about Ojai's Planning Commission and Community Development Department. At least that, in the past is what I heard. I can't verify it, but I hear the
Yeah, I don't know
complaint.
that it's the process. I'm not hearing that anymore. I'm hearing that from the city of Ventura and other cities that are within our county, that their process is much longer than what ours is. I wouldn't say that ours is streamlined by any stretch of the imagination, but taking years to process is something that I think has been eradicated at this point.
We haven't seen that here. But back to standards, we've got objective standards and subjective standards, but underutilized as an appellation on a parcel is so subjective that it worries me.
Underutilized is a term that's used by HCD. It's not a term that we use independent. It's one of their terms, and then they have specific parameters that fall through
It makes pictures in my mind of the city going to a parcel owner and saying, you must build something more on this plot of land. And I don't like the idea of the city doing that.
Yeah, it does seem a little odd to say, oh, guess what?
Well, don't
Right.
a lot of cities do that sort of thing with builders in their community, and they'll point out places that look like they could be purchased and rehabbed? I mean, isn't that a normal process that
Yeah, if you have
a
an
lot of
economic,
cities do?
if you have an economic development department, then I would suppose that you probably have the resources to do that.
Yeah, you're the economic
Yeah,
development department.
James and I are the economic development department. That's what you're looking at.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not an unusual thing for cities to do that, to look at places that could be
Proactive.
upgraded.
And suggest that developers go in, buy the property, and build more than there is there.
Yeah, if
I agree,
If it's,
but don't tell the property owner
Oh,
that
no.
it must be done.
no, it's just like, let's just say you have a property owner who's not been keeping up their property, they're out of town person,
We have
someone you could
plenty of
contact,
that,
are you
I'm
interested
sure.
in selling this property? That kind of thing. But I don't know. that
Starting
ever
those
is done.
discussions early on.
So I know we're still kind of on 6. I just wanted to point out one little item. Proactive participation under the SB 35. If we could add Ojai Unified School District in there, I don't know how, I believe that's part of our proactive participation, correct? We have a overlay on one of their properties, I believe.
We do.
Yeah, we do.
We
Hold
do.
on. But you're talking about proactive participation.
It's basically designed to help low-income households associated with special needs populations, and then we highlight farm workers, disabled. And for the example, I think we should put in, I think teachers would be.
Well, hold on. We're not looking at adding
I know,
language
I know,
into
I know.
this. I just noticed that you're trying
Sorry,
to,
I'm adding.
and I thought we gave a disclaimer at the beginning.
Okay,
I
sorry.
think in the same way that you can't say, this affordable housing is for people that live in Ojai,
I get you.
you start saying, it's only for teachers, it's
Right.
only for gun shop owners.
I know, but we highlight farmers.
Well,
also.
schools can do that, actually.
The state,
I
We
know.
don't have any
Schools can.
farmers in Ojai, so.
There was one other
how-
one,
How are we gonna
fast
get farm
tracking,
worker housing?
fast tracking the environmental review, is that something that you're looking at?
Well, there's already provisions within CEQA that fast track it already, but there's also other Senate bills that fast track it as well. SB 330 and SB 35.
I just wondered why that was in there, if we're already fast tracking, so.
Bringing it forward and identifying what those are, I think, is
Okay.
probably what it's really boiling down to.
Okay, so that's happening.
Yeah, and just to be fair, the state's looking for us to make that known. Not for it to be hidden in the dark, but to be out in the open now.
Okay.
Okay, so should we start with one and?
We can go to 1 and then skip 6. Clearly 6 has been discussed.
Try that.
Build that thing.
And if you can explain what's going on in 25 words or less, we'll get out of here tonight.
Yes.
Well, I'll have Alex go through some of these, and then I'll jump in when necessary. But him and I have been working on this over the last several weeks, over the last several months, actually, trying to come up with strategies to get some of these moving forward. So
Awesome.
Great.
So yeah, and thank you for Chair for giving some insight into the type of depth you want to go to for through each of these programs, right? 25 words or less.
Well,
Yeah.
let's start with that, and then if commissioners have questions,
Copy
then
that.
we'll build.
Seen how we operate.
So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to look at the graph, and then I'm going to go back and forth between that and the housing element, because the graph kind of does that to a certain extent. So each color that you're looking at is a category of how to categorize each of the programs. So starting with program number 1, the category for this is adequate housing sites, and so that's going to be for all of these programs under this color. So when you're looking at these programs, that is what the intended higher goal is for each of those programs. That's the goal that each of these programs are trying to achieve. Okay, so the first one is adequate sites for RENA and monitoring of no net loss, and the goal for this in the programs after it is to dovetail the provision of affordable housing for overarching community objectives, which are low impact development, integration with community context, and locating housing near job. So that is the goal for this program for adequate sites for RENA and monitoring of no net loss. Are there any questions about this specific program?
You're talking about one.
Talk about one.
yeah, you know, it's interesting.
Under page 55, the second bullet there, under objectives and timelines.
Page 55?
55, is there a 55?
Oh, well, it's.
It's 55 of the housing
Yeah.
action plan,
Page
so
2.
it's basically page 2.
Of 6,
Page- okay.
attachment B.
Okay.
Under objectives and timeline, there seems to be a little project for us there, which is the development standards of the overlay to ensure the standards are appropriate to facilitate and encourage the development of affordable housing, which gets to the subjective and the objective standards. I spent some time, I won't go into it today, but it seemed like it's a pretty intense project.
Yeah, there are quite a few objective standards within the SPL overlay, but there are some subjective. We've got to carve out and identify what standards we can enforce within this SPL and which ones just aren't enforceable at this point, given the objective parameters and the development standards that are now currently in place.
And I would say there's one, and I hope we can look at it and discuss it at some point, but the difference between the overlay height requirements and the underlying zone. So an example is under C1. The C1 zone is 30 feet and 2 stories. No, they have no stories. No stories. 35 feet. And
The VMU has a height restriction, but not a story
yeah, I'm talking
restriction.
about the C1 because that's one,
Right.
the one we're going to be dealing with pretty soon, I think.
Same with VM, same as VM.
Yeah,
as
I think they're
VMU.
all that way.
Height limit, but not a.
Not a story limitation.
And so the height limit and the stories are in the SB overlay, so it's 30 feet, and it can't be more than 2 stories. It seems like that is a barrier to me, because it's more restricted than the underlying zone, which happens to be commercial. So you could have a housing project that has to be 5 feet lower and can't be 2 stories, but the C1 next to it could be 2 stories and 35 feet.
But not residential. The
It could
C1
be
doesn't
no
allow.
residential, but,
Yeah, the C1 currently doesn't allow for residential. But I get what you're saying.
because it just seems like
Yeah,
not
the overlay has its
consistent.
own.
And if you look at things like sightline and so forth, do we have sightline in our ordinance? I thought we didn't.
No.
So why is sightline mentioned in the overlay zone?
It's
View shed.
some of those parameters that were identified within the SPL are part of the EIR that was developed as a part of the mitigation from the EIR. So those were folded into the SPL overlay to bring it down to a less than significant impact.
Uh-huh.
That's the whole purpose.
Of course, that was part of design review too, was looking at view shed, or if that's the right word, yeah.
Yeah, well, viewshed is already within our DRP parameters as well.
Yeah.
That was something that we just recently brought forward as a separate project, single family residential, and discussed pretty in depth with a room full of people.
That's true. So those seem like subjective examples to me, but anyway. So anyway, there's a lot here.
We can certainly have that discussion. I'm not sure that I'm quite on the same page with all those, but I do appreciate the conversation and look forward
Saying the
to.
height and story limit on SPL overlay was I don't want to put words in your mouth. It was a
I don't think that
compromise
piece.
within
I don't
the
think that.
EIR.
I don't think that piece was. I think the other pieces that are folded in as a part of technical requirements, technical study requirements were. The height, I don't think was.
So environment includes view shed? So like it's some kind of psychological thing, or people are gonna, I don't get it. I don't
Well,
see the
that's-
connection there.
that's
In
tough.
2014, that was the discussion piece. I can't speak for it.
But it is true that if there's an SPL overlay, that if there are any differences between the development standards for the base zoning and the development standards for the SPL overlay, that the overlay is what you follow, whether it's more flexible or less flexible, more restrictive or less restrictive, you go by the overlay,
Correct.
not the base zoning.
If you're using it for the purpose of the overlay, then yes. For instance,
Right.
if they end up wanting to build manufacturing on a site that has an overlay, the overlay allows for those standards to be applied for that specific use. In this case, we're
Right.
talking about affordable housing. But if they're not doing affordable housing, they're doing something else, then the base zone rules.
Right, okay.
So is this something you guys are gonna put together, or do you want us to give you some input? Because I'm gonna give you input whether you want me to or not, but
I think I'll get input either way. Look, we're working on it, and certainly we will take the input.
And those, that,
So that's one.
I
I
think
think
some of-
we've done.
All
we've
right.
I
done.
think some
Good
of
progress.
these inputs are going to be things where we need to take it up as a commission to talk about modifying Title X.
yeah.
And we still have issues, having gotten through the errata on Title X, we now have more substantive issues that we need to cover. And I would welcome, even if we took them one or two at a time, that we take them.
Sure. The one thing that I would caution on the Title X, and that leads us into the general plan update, which is item number 2, is in the near term, we're going to be having some sort of a joint meeting with City Council, and then we're going to have some sort of a work program that we're going to be discussing and highlighting. I think within that program, that work program, this body should be thinking about what items are critical, what items the council can agree to in terms of this body working on over the next year or 2 years. That way, we're not spinning our wheels on working on one piece to take forward only to find that it ends up getting rejected. if that makes any sense.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense, and I think that all of us should be looking at potential issues, and let's bring them forward, and let's take that list of issues to, not the next meeting with the city council, because we only got through one of 3 elements last night. And if the other 2 go the same way, maybe it'll be our 4th joint meeting with the city council.
Yeah, I
that we
don't want to
take
get
up
into the
these
details of it,
issues.
but yes.
Question.
A lot
do-
of discussion over a
do-
4-hour period.
Do we go back and have another joint meeting to cover items 2 and 3 that weren't
I think so.
completed last night?
By the way, there's one item of unfinished
Doesn't necessarily have
business
to do
on
us.
the first
They
item
have to
from
do it.
last night, which I knew because I'd seen it, but I'd forgotten about it. I specifically asked if we could, if the city council would agree to take the real, no kidding residences on the east side of Fulton Street and take them out of the M1 zone and put them in VMU like the people across the street from them, because they're really residences. Well, it turns out there's one on the west side of Bryant Street as well.
I don't think they decided that, did they?
They did not. I brought up the east side of Fulton,
Yeah.
and they said, yeah, good idea. I didn't bring up the west side of Bryant.
They didn't
But
actually
it's-
take up either one, did
It's
they?
a similarly situated
Yeah.
parcel.
Yeah, let's stay focused on this, but I get what you're saying.
Just make a note of it and talk to council about it.
Okay. Duly noted.
Can I ask a question? Just reading this sentence, exactly what it means. While the housing element is being updated ahead of the overall general plan update, due to statutory deadline, we've already done that. This strategy, general plan update, for accommodating future residential growth has been carefully evaluated by the community. Is that, I think we're in the middle of that, aren't we?
Carefully evaluated by the community means when we went through that process in 2021, where we had, I want to say, 4 or 5 meetings where the community, we gathered community input, had this body review the item through red lines. We went through the red line item, this red line document.
Are you talking about the wait a
Talking about
minute.
housing.
Oh, the general plan.
Yeah, it's a
As well, right?
Yeah, this is talking about the general plan. It sounds to me, from based on last night, that that's not true, because everyone's still debating it. And
Well, we also have a new council.
that's true, but that's another aspect of it, too. The general plan update will ensure internal consistency with all the elements, including the housing element. Well, since the housing element is already here, the general plan has to, what's the word? Be consistent with the housing element.
Correct.
If they're gonna change the housing element, which that came up last night. but it
Housing
sounded
element
like
is
they
not
didn't
yet
wanna do it.
certified.
Huh?
The housing element is not yet certified.
That's
But there
true.
is a consistency requirement as a part of CEQA. So
And
there,
that's gonna be determined
Then
by
that's-
HCD?
no, it's going to be determined by the consultants and then verified by HCD.
I see. So, okay.
So 2, I think, just broadly, I think you've already touched on it. We're in the middle. You saw last night of the 5 bullets or the 5 kind of pictures that we're in the middle of it, kind of leaning into the 4th bullet, and then obviously the 5th is final adoption. So we're leaning into the later stages. We're in like the 7th innings. We're going from the 6th inning to the 7th inning. We're not quite in the 7th inning stretch yet, right? But we're moving towards that at this point.
Thought
When-
we went backwards last night.
Well, that is one part of it in terms of workshops. But the reality is that the community has provided quite a bit of input. And I think these workshops will either solidify that or identify pivots throughout this process. So,
Okay?
so that's 2. 3 is
Affordable housing covenants, and the This is effectively the conversion of market rate units into affordable housing through a combination of different strategies, and notably the purchase of affordability covenants and Section 8 property-based assistance. The objectives for this is ongoing monitoring of the city's affordable housing inventory, which, as Commissioner Trent mentioned, is currently at 162. And then continuing to seek opportunities, working with the Housing Authority of Ventura County and other nonprofit organizations. And we're responsible for that, CDD is, and also the funding sources is CDD's budget.
What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, it says CDD's budget, but really it's the general budget. I mean, it's the general plan, the general
What does it
fund.
mean to say purchase affordability covenants? You have to purchase those? I thought they,
It
just-
sounds like you're giving a landlord some money up front to lower rents for some specified period.
Yeah,
Is that what it means?
it's kind of a swap of sorts is really kind of the way you can look at it, just the way you described. The reality is that we work with other agencies in order for that to be realized. So we have partnerships. It's not something that we do
Other
deliberately.
people's money.
Yeah.
so when an apartment, when there's one of these developments things, deed restrict theirs, they get paid to deed restrict them. Is that what you're saying? That's the covenant.
That's the affordability.
That's the
covenant.
affordable housing. Yes. Here's the reality is that we, as a city, we don't typically see that because it's done by another agency
I see.
that we've already partnered with. I mean, we're not a large city, we're not a large staff. It's
Looking at
Alex
most-
and I.
So we don't care how we get them, the covenants, as long as we get them.
Correct. And we get credit for it too.
Okay.
And that's where you're seeing the 162.
Number 4 is increase the supply of ADUs. I think that's pretty much self-explanatory.
Yeah, increasing the supply is an interesting phrase that we use for this title because it talks about new ADUs versus ADU compliance program. We really have hammed up what we currently do because not all cities do this compliance program. And that's a part of a process that we had done years prior and in terms of identifying that there were several illegal units. And in order for us to get those online and in a safe condition, we had to kind of do a partnership with these individuals. And
Yes, we're not increasing the supply of ADUs, we're increasing the number of officially counted ADUs.
Yeah.
Might not have been ADUs before.
So you don't, they don't have to pay the fees, and they'll be like, as long as they meet code or something like that, they can.
Yeah, there's basically a checklist of things that they've got to go through, which are all safety related. And it's as far as them meeting kind of the shell of the requirements of an ADU.
And these new ADUs, as you mentioned, add to the housing inventory, but they don't necessarily add to the affordable housing inventory.
Well, they can add to the they can add to how we qualify them in terms of being qualified as moderate. So they come in as moderate, and then we classify that each year. So we figure out what that number is. Like for instance, for 2022, we just recently submitted that to HCD, and that included both the new ADUs
Permitted and unpermitted?
and as well as the compliance
Compliance
units
program.
as well.
Okay, cool.
Yes, we've got to identify that as a part of as them being compliance units as well.
So do we incentivize any new ADUs, or they just do it on their own?
I don't think we need to. They come in pretty heavily right now. So,
But
and they've been doing
because-
that for the last probably 5 or 6 years.
Because the state defines an ADU as moderate level affordable housing, it does in fact, however you get an ADU onto the books, you've increased the inventory, the official inventory of affordable housing.
Yeah, and when we're speaking about ADUs, it's also junior ADUs as well. I don't know that that's necessarily listed here, but it is actually listed here. And those have an interesting carve out and caveat, which If you're doing an ADU, a junior ADU, and you have your main residence, there is a deed restriction requirement that requires you to live in one of those three.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But if it's just an ADU if it's just an ADU and a junior ADU, deed restriction is not required.
There's also part of the code that says if you have a main residence and a guest house that doesn't have a kitchen in it, then you're allowed by right to build an ADU.
Yeah.
But if you have a main house and an ADU, you're not allowed to build a guest house.
That's true. Here, okay, so guest house, we don't count towards the ADU provisions because they don't contain a kitchen.
It's not a residence.
Right.
Yeah.
And remind me how many ADUs we built in the past few years,
In the past few years,
permitted?
probably on an average of 16 to 20, in some cases 25.
Okay.
So if you just do the math on an average of 20 each year,
That's new
22.
builds
New
plus,
builds.
plus conversions plus compliance program.
correct.
Okay, so
Yep.
you're looking at what, six oh.
So the compliance is not adding anything, it's just
So how
making
many?
it legal.
Well, but it's bringing them online, which
It's
we
part
we
of the
get credit
numbers
for.
game.
That's
How
true,
many-
It
our
is a
numbers
numbers
game,
How
I'm
many
talking about
single-family homes have
solving
we
the
built
problem.
during that
Yes.
same time frame? Permitted?
On average, one
One.
or less than one.
And then on average, how many
Of new builds,
multifamily?
you're saying, yeah.
How many multifamily have we built?
We have not built a new multifamily in,
25 years.
I think 2003, 2004 was the
So
last
the
time.
ADU program is pretty successful so far.
It is our most successful program.
So, when you get a
Since
permit.
2017. Pre-2017, there were rules that made it difficult still.
So when you get a permit for an ADU, do you have to live in the underlying house?
ADU, no. But if you have a junior ADU and an ADU and the main residence, then yes. There's a deed restriction that's recorded against the property.
So if someone has a rental house, they could add an ADU.
Yes,
Yes, and have a second rental.
and have a second rental.
Interesting.
They can have all three, main residence, an ADU, and a jail.
And do we
But you
don't
have
have
to live in
any
one of
way
But
of
if they
knowing,
don't live there, they can only have two of the three.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you basically manage the
do
property.
we have any way of knowing that, how many of which we have? How many people are just adding ADUs to where they live, or how many people that own 4 or 5 rentals are just adding more rental space? So
The
they can
data
make
doesn't
more
go
money?
that deep. The data
Pardon?
doesn't go that deep. I know we talked about that earlier. It doesn't go to that depth at this point. In terms of, you're talking about breaking it down in terms of how many people are living there, how many people are renting it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. No,
And
it doesn't.
How many, how many,
Now, Fact Finder or some other census data may be going out and finding that through maybe the Department of Finance.
Mm-hmm.
So the Department of Finance might have some of that information, but it's not localized here.
I see.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the next
5,
one.
second page.
Here, I'll take this one, the tiny home pilot program. So we actually have, City Council has adopted that pilot program, and we are bringing an update to City Council in the near term. We have had one tiny home that has been recently cited and approved and finalized. And we have others that are showing interest in it as well. Now that pilot program I think it limited the number to 10 each year, and then for us to come back after the 2-year pilot program and reevaluate the future of it.
And when did the pilot program start?
Let's see, I think it was last year at the end of 2021, 2022.
2-year program. It'll
It's a
end.
2-year
It'll end in
program.
So in
2023.
1 year, we've got.
So the end of this year, we'll be evaluating.
So they said up
Council
to
will be
10
evaluating
a
the
year
future.
for 2 years, and we got one the first year.
Yeah. We had interest in others, and then one actually applied and then ended up withdrawing. There are some barriers to it that we're evaluating right now that we've found. Doesn't make it impossible, but it certainly is a hoop that we've been working with.
So there
with
is
them
now
on.
one tiny home in the city.
We have one. You're never going to see it because it's so well hidden.
So these tiny homes, are
It's
they?
tiny, yeah.
Well, I don't know about tiny. Well, it is. I mean,
Tiny, it's a form of ADU, right? It's just small.
It is. It's another option. So the way that provision works is it's not in addition to, but in replacement of. So you can have an ADU or you can have a tiny home. You can have both.
And is this one new, or is this in replacement of an ADU?
There was no ADU on that site.
Okay.
Now,
So
can
it-
you have, could someone have a piece of property and put like 6 tiny homes on it?
Just
Like
one.
I've seen, oh, you only can do one?
You can only do one per the way this pilot program is functioning. It's just one.
'Cause I know a lot of people-
I have seen that where you basically build tiny home villages, which
Yeah.
I would argue is called something else, but I'm not going there.
Well, and I also heard that those tiny homes are not that affordable. I've heard that they can cost up to $400,000 to $500,000 to build.
Depends how fancy they are.
Some are, right. Yeah, I mean, there's been an explosion of it.
Yeah.
Right.
So, don't we have one out in the unincorporated areas that nonprofit group is building? Is that
I don't know.
a village? Oh,
A tiny
okay.
home village, I'm not sure of, yeah.
Okay.
I haven't been tracking that.
All right, let's track our programs.
Okay, yes, let's stay localized here. 6, I think we have
We did.
knocked it out of the park.
We
Yep, we-
killed
Let's move
that
on to
one.
7.
So 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are all affordable housing supply, okay?
Yep.
I did want to quickly talk about 8, capacity preservation. What does that entail?
Oh, capacity preservation. I believe there's a section of our code. It's in the 900s. It's like 102906.
10906. Yep.
Okay, I knew it was an even number. that talks about preservation, and if you don't preserve, then there's in lieu fees that you shall pay. They give you kind of a laundry list of items. I think it's 3 different options to choose from. The reality is that if we're losing a unit that's not single family, meaning if somebody's looking to demo or convert, then we're looking at, okay, so then where else are you going to put that unit? So we're not displacing a unit
Was
that we've.
part of that no net loss that we saw in program 1?
Yeah, it's a continuation of that to a certain degree, but then it provides the parameters for
This is not just affordable, this is any housing.
any housing. Yeah, it's like it's a tack on to the no net loss piece. Is really what
You
it,
said 102906?
Yes.
yeah. 90, which one is
Go
the
read that
no net
again.
loss? Is that 904? Yeah, 10906.
Yeah, 906 is termed residential development capacity, and then 904 is replacement housing.
Yeah, so 904 and then
So-
906.
And if
When
you
you
look to
say-
the, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
I'm trying to clarify this. Below the allowable density, so that's the zoning density, not the density of what was there.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Not without a density bonus. It's if I can't imagine somebody coming in and saying, I don't want to build to that density. I want to build
Yeah,
something
won't
less.
make any sense, no.
It doesn't make financial sense to me. And as a developer, I would think they would be thinking more, not less.
Yeah.
So it pencils out. But that provision's still in there in the off chance that when you have a vacant site or quote unquote an underutilized, thank you, the term, that you're still making the full use of that site. If you're not, then you're being dinged. It's almost incentivizing that you're building it to the density. Because if you're not, then you've got parameters that you've got to follow.
So it'd have to be a zone that's more than single family, obviously, because otherwise it's just one unit, but,
For the context of this city, yes.
do we have very much land that's not single family?
We do,
Oh.
not a lot. That's vacant.
I see.
You can see them throughout the city currently.
Okay.
Okay, keep moving on.
The last two in this category are alternative housing material demonstration and density bonus. Those are programs 9 and 10 that are within this category, which is affordable housing supply.
Yeah, number 10 says by the end of 2022, amend the density bonus ordinance. to be consistent with state law. I presume that be consistent with state law, which granted is a moving target, is applicable to every element that we're talking about here. That's one of the things that we have to do. Have we done this one?
No, we have not done that one yet.
Okay. Yeah,
But we
there's
are, I mean, we are
there's a
working
table
on it
in-
at this point.
in 10-2 somewhere that has the density bonus stuff.
Yes.
So AB
It's
2,
10 to-
3, 4, 5 would be where you would find the state requirement?
For density bonus?
Increases maximum allowable.
There's a, I believe the city has a separate
Oh, I guess
density
there's
bonus.
Yeah, we have a separate
3 different ones.
municipal code for it. Yeah.
Right, there's the state density bonus law, and then there's the city's density bonus law, and those are two separate things.
And
Yeah,
they're
and there's
not
some-
consistent at the moment, you're saying.
No, they're not.
They're not.
And the reality is there's some recent assembly bills and Senate bills that have come forward that are rendering ours obsolete.
Increasing the speed of the moving target?
Sometimes, yeah.
So if someone comes in and wants a density bonus, we've got to follow the state law, not what's in our code, I assume.
State law trumps. Yes.
Right, I think what usually happens, and Lucas can correct me if I'm wrong, is that a developer will come in and specify whether they want to apply under the city's, state density bonus law or the state's.
I
And if
see.
they choose the state's, then we follow the state. And if they choose ours, then, we could apply ours. But
Yeah.
I haven't seen a situation here.
I have, but I don't want to mention specific projects.
Yeah, no need to, but so that's just how
So
it's going.
this alternative
But they're out there.
materials part, I assume we're done with density bonus.
Yep.
Alternative materials, who's doing that? Is that the Building and Appeals Board since?
No, it's staff, and that would be something we'd be bringing to this body and then to council as well. The idea is to
That
do
feels
kind of like a
building
demonstration.
That feels like building standards.
Well, I mean, it could be to a certain degree.
Alternative
really what it-
material,
What it boils down to is that we're looking to display, to kind of put out there the materials, and based on those materials, the provisions that are, for lack of a better term, what you can expect for new construction moving forward versus what's out there right now. I mean, obviously the standards have changed because of fire requirements. So the term fire hardening is probably a term that
we do have a requirement now for Class A roofs, but that's in Title IX.
yeah, that's not
And
within.
this feels
Title
like Title IX material to me.
I had thought, hold on, let me just read it again.
So we're gonna actually put this material out someplace, and we're gonna build something with it, or just the city council, and we're gonna go by and look at it?
I don't know that we've completely impacted that at this point. I don't want to.
Bringing a hay bale into a city council meeting constitute a demonstration of an alternative?
A lot of
material?
different ways that you can constitute a demonstration.
Now,
I
they
don't know
said
that
a
hail bale-
location for the city. They didn't say in the city council, but I guess that could be the location.
Yeah, and it actually identifies the to place the units for display on a temporary basis to be determined on a case-by-case scenario. So I think the idea was with something like this, it would be something kind of cutting edge, right? Either it be a unit itself or material attached to the unit on display to say, hey, have you seen the latest and greatest?
So where would you get this information from? You're just gonna,
It's going to be, look, there are resources out there, and there are community members that are very
a lot of
plugged
community
in,
members, I know that.
that are very plugged into this,
I've
and
been to
sending
some, seminars. on that, too.
sending us information to kind of help and guide to a certain degree.
Okay.
All right, we already talked about density bonus, number 10. Moving on to number 11.
Can we take up the density bonus table at some point here?
As a part of the revisions to the code, then
What our
absolutely.
code says, here's what state law requires us to change. Can we recommend that as a text amendment to the city council?
It's a part of our program.
That's the process.
Yeah, it's a part of our program. Then yes, yeah. So if we're talking about Title 10 revisions, this is one that we're already putting in the books that we have to do. It's not one where it's like, oh, within this next 8 years, let's look at doing it. No, this is it's not a should, but shall.
Okay, number 11, housing for persons with special needs. That's another one, amend the code.
Yeah. And it's referencing housing needs as outlined above. If you go into the housing element in that same program, you'll see what, because that's the objective for this program. If you go into the actual housing element, you'll see what it means in terms of outlining above. There's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different.
Yeah, there's
factors.
SROs, there's supportive housing, there's emergency and transitional housing. These all have assembly bills and Senate bills tied to them. I thought SROs did, but I'm not seeing it. Those
It's
have been
there.
around for a while.
Yeah, it's the
Low
second
barrier
last one.
navigation centers.
Also,
I know all those words, but I don't know what it means when they're strung together like that.
also a term of art in the in state law. So I also know all those words, but
That
I
means
don't know if
you're
I'm
not
able to
going
define
very
it off
high
the top
the
of my
ground
head.
to get to where you're going. It's low elevation.
Well, it sounds like it's a transitional housing, right?
Housing first, yeah.
Essentially getting people off the
Oh, I've heard about
the
those.
street into a shelter temporarily as they.
It's like, hey, let's give you a house and we'll do the paperwork later.
Right.
Idea.
Right.
But yeah, this is effectively saying we need to amend the code for specific reasons from state law regarding that.
So what are we doing?
That's something that will be coming back to this body because there are provisions in the code that currently don't meet these parameters, which is the reason why we have this program in here.
Okay? 12, that sounds like more of the same,
We
reasonable
don't have any,
accommodation
just one real quick, we
for
don't have any
persons with
emergency shelters, do we?
disabilities.
Okay.
Isn't that,
The objective for this is by the end of 22 provide reasonable accommodation procedures on the city website,
how is that different from 11?
because it's for the city website. It's not an amendment to the code.
Yeah, so this one is just providing information versus actually changing the parameters of our code.
Okay.
So it's a rewrite to the code to get us in compliance with these
With
recent
number 11.
Yeah, with these recent assembly bills.
12 is
and stuff.
publicizing that.
Yes.
Publicizing information and
Okay.
resources and outreach, essentially. Not something that we would have personally, but saying, hey, this resource is available to these groups, making them aware of it. So if people are calling and asking
I
questions
think
that are
it's an
localized.
ADA requirement to inform people,
Yeah.
inform the public.
13 is the Ojai Municipal Code Growth Management Ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not in compliance with state law at the moment, or?
Well, it says if and when the state suspension.
I
of
just,
road
I found that ordinance
Maybe
somewhere, but
lifted.
So here's the interesting thing about this. I mean, we are monitoring it because who knows? I mean, that date could change from 2030, but it was 2025 and then recently changed to 2030. It's not even within this cycle. So we'll be monitoring it, but the reality is it's kind of a placeholder to see what happens.
Basically, it's saying we can't, it overrides our growth management ordinance and says we can't do it.
Absolutely. We can't enforce it, but we continue to monitor and pile on the, what is it referred to as? There's basically units that we continue to pile on each year, and it's based on a formula. Population, I think it's the household size, and then there's another factor that we do in the division.
Got it.
So
and is this based on the air quality requirements, or does it include the LOS and
It's air
VM?
quality and
That part?
that part is not. The second part is not. The first part is.
Stealth.
That's a part of the study, and that one actually is something that we monitor every year. We get it from the Department of Finance. That data usually comes out mid-May, and then we take that data, compile it out. It spits out a number, and then we take it to council. It's a part of the.
But for housing, we can't use that to lower the amount of housing.
Yeah, so it was used as a growth management tool,
We had it. We used
which
to have it.
we cannot use
Okay.
to hinder growth at this
Yeah,
point.
if you look at our general plan in 1997, it outlines this ordinance.
Oh, I know. And then there was a resolution, 992 or something. I downloaded it, but now I forgot to bring it. But anyway, it was a resolution that outlined this, that
Yeah, because there were changes made. I want to say 7 years ago, maybe, that before each year it would go away, meaning that number would go away. But we've been stockpiling that number since then, and I think it was only allowing either residential, single family residential, or not allowing multifamily, and now it's done. It allows for both. So there's been some barriers that have been merged to kind of give some additional clarity.
did the LOS barrier used to apply to Ojai?
I think LOS is in 14. It talks about roadway capacity.
Level of service is what you're talking about?
Yeah, level of services, because that.
Yeah, level of service is local. LOS is localized versus VMT, which is regional. VMT is required through CEQA, so as a part of the process and reviewing it.
Caltrans.
And Caltrans, exactly. There's thresholds that they use and plug in. These engineers are much smarter than I in terms of how that functions. They spit on a number and then they justify that number. LOS is really the roadways and the turning movements and whether or not there's queuing that's creating a situation where you have an A through, I think, F, and A being the best in terms of intersections. I don't think we have a single intersection that's A. We have intersections that are more in the E and the F, kind of towards the bottom. But that's not a factor that we can use in hindering development anymore. It's VMT that then rules. We can still use it in terms of giving direction localized, but we can't use it like we used to, like all the cities used to use it as a deterrent for development. All right.
Water availability, is that
Where are we
something
at here?
that is within the city's purview? This is in
Resource constraints. you're talking about?
Resource
source
constraints.
constraints?
Yeah, I had the same question. 'Cause
Used to have it in the
we don't
grant.
control that.
Right.
Ordinance.
One of the objectives for this is an ongoing partnership with Casitas Municipal Water District. So it's not, it's a joint effort. It's not.
Yeah.
something that's
And it's
completely
interesting, the partnership is if and when developments come through, typically we're having a conversation with Casitas just to understand their parameters. Not influencing those parameters, just to understand them. So,
So this
Something
study is being done by them? We're not doing a study on environmental documentation to determine we have sufficient water, because that's
It's
not
not
for
us.
us to do.
if anything, we'll be taking the study that they have on their website or that they provide to us.
I see.
A related topic, and I think we need to get to it at some point, is the difference between will serve and water allocation by the water purveyor.
Right.
And I'm not really sure what will serve means, but it sounds a lot like, yes, there is a water pipe in your neighborhood, and it would be physically possible to hook up to it. But it's not the same as saying, yes, there's sufficient water in your neighborhood to accommodate the projected use of this new project. And
So I was at Casitas when
seems
this.
to me we ought to be doing the latter, and we're doing the former right now.
Right. The former because there is a parameter in the code that speaks specifically to that. And I don't want to get into the details of that parameter, but
I'm just saying I think that's a topic we need to take up and understand, because it's not a barrier to development in the formal sense, but it could turn out to be one.
right.
We have it in our housing overlay, and I think the word is wrong, because when I was at Casitas and they were dealing with the Cabrillo water they explained the two different processes they do. The first one is a water allocation. They give you a preliminary allocation that they got enough water, which they did, 10 acre feet, I think it was. But the well serve doesn't come until the permitting part of it. In other words, the building permit.
So it guarantees, is that the guarantee
And
then?
so that, after that, because they
Will
can't,
serve doesn't have a number in it. The water allocation may have a
does,
number
but
attached.
yes, but
But the
the
will
well,
serve does not.
they're approving the design of the project as the building permit and so forth is going forward, because when you're first designing a project, you may use less or more water than when you build it, because so they evaluate it and they give you a well serve
Based on that evaluation.
based on your final design. But they've already given you an allocation temporarily,
Yeah.
and that's, should be what we base it on, because we're approving things before the final permit. Anyway, that's
Yeah,
what I was
we're
explaining to me.
conditioning it basically.
And some cities use well served the other way around. The term is is apparently, some cities in Ventura County use well served as allocation. So the term is confusing. We're like Casitas is one of the few ones that use the term only at giving you your final permit for them to hook up and give you water.
So, quick question on the revise the city's CEQA guidelines by the end of 2023. Is that are we looking to make CEQA more restrictive?
So the city's CEQA guidelines have not been updated since 2002.
Okay.
We took forward to city council, I want to say a year ago, the kind of some preliminary thoughts on those CEQA guidelines and got the nod to move forward. So we're just working through that right now. The unfortunate thing, or maybe the fortunate thing is it literally is a rewrite of all of our CEQA guidelines, just because of how long it's been. Really, you're supposed to be updating these incrementally every year. We haven't.
Right.
So it's basically going to be a rewrite. I mean,
The state has the CEQA guidelines.
so these are localized guidelines so CEQA has their own guidelines and carve outs from an exemption standpoint, and then cities can go further
Okay.
than that and clarify specific projects or specific types of projects that could be carve outs, and then in addition to that, provide clarity on how to evaluate
Got it.
the various like traffic, air quality, those types of pieces then end up being, okay, so you got to make sure that you're following this measure as you're moving forward. Like VMT isn't even mentioned in our localized guidelines right now, and they absolutely need to.
So it would seem like clarification makes sense, but when it comes to housing, we couldn't have stricter guidelines in the state.
With localized guidelines, they tend to be less strict.
Oh, okay. So so are we gonna review these as a planning commission? Okay.
Yep.
Just wondered.
Yes, absolutely. These guidelines, because if I use these as an exemption in the future, your first question is going to be, where are these guidelines at?
Okay.
So it's important that this body sees that as a part of your
So we
process.
review them and they'll be sent off to the city council to approve.
Yes.
Okay.
Seems
Yeah,
to me.
it's a
when-
two-step process.
When you and I, before Alex joined the team here, we were looking at pieces of the code that said in accordance with the city's CEQA guidelines.
And at that time, I didn't think we
Question
had
was,
any.
where is that?
I didn't think we had any and then I discovered them probably 6 to 8 months later.
That's documents outside the code, evidently.
Yes.
What part of they're not in the code at all?
No, those aren't embedded into the code. Instead, it's a document that is.
They're online somewhere?
They are online now, yes.
And they're referenced by the code?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is tricky when you do that within the municipal code, because then you assume that you have that readily available.
Yeah, but, before I got on this board, I heard a lot of debates at various developments about CEQA guidelines, whether they met them or not. I was like, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Who
good.
knows all this?
Right.
So you can go to the city website and search for CEQA guidelines?
Local CEQA guidelines, yes.
Local CEQA.
Yeah, if you're looking for just CEQA guidelines, you won't find those. It's
Now,
local
The state
CEQA
CEQA guidelines also apply, potentially.
Absolutely.
Now,
Those
that
are what
thing
you
is-
really look at first.
Okay, those are
Smaller smaller projects are then what you look at for these localized guidelines. Yep. Design review is next, 15. We're almost there. We're on the home stretch here.
Keep in mind, everything that we just said, the category is housing impediments. So these are all sort of initiated to alleviate impediments to housing. Last one is design review.
Yep.
So the design review, I'll just go into this
Yeah,
one
go
just
ahead, go
real
ahead.
quick. The design review standards at present don't include objective standards. So those need to be incorporated within this design review phase, which is in basically the design review permit, which is the DRP. We don't have those currently, so any of our subjective findings cannot be used for housing projects. Period.
Denial or reducing the size. I think you can use them for other purposes.
You can use it for other purposes, like for instance, if we're doing a conditional use permit, like we have, it's fine. However, if we're doing housing, can't.
So now, are you going to get examples from other cities or something, or how are you
Yeah,
going to do
I've already started looking at some other cities that are localized that have a pretty good start. I think we're going to probably modify some of those based on it being Ojai, make them more Ojai, and not so.
Are you going to give us alternatives, or are you just going to give us your conclusion?
That'd be my recommendation. Is what
But I mean,
it'd be coming
Are
forward.
we being able to see other approaches that we could evaluate, whether they?
I'm not sure how that's going to end up getting spun. Potentially,
Fine.
could look at it. I mean, the reality is so think about it. When we were looking at the item we just had earlier, formula businesses,
Attribute.
we ended up doing a more in-depth discussion, having more in-depth discussion of other cities that also had kind of a formula business format, right? And looking at the ways in which they approach the situation as businesses come forward. Businesses or cities of similar size, cities much larger, cities within the state, cities outside the state. We're looking at all those, right? And we went through and discussed it before this body and then came to conclusions, obviously at the end of the night, that let's just reduce the number and add a couple other pieces within the code in terms of revisions and left it at that. But that didn't come in one meeting. That came in several meetings. And that could very well be what ends up happening with some of these. Maybe it's a discussion in the beginning. I can't imagine that something like this would be one meeting and we're done.
Yeah, but I mean, determining what's Ojai might have different points of view.
Depends on
We
who
could literally
shows
have
up.
five
I'm talking
individuals
about
on this
even among
body.
us.
That's true.
So anyway, that's
All right.
just know that we recognize that as well. That we're a body of many.
Yeah, 16.
Mosaic.
Mosaic, that's right.
You saw that, didn't you? Yes.
Vision.
Last night.
Program 16 I find interesting because I know it talks about preservation of existing affordable housing. Now, affordable housing is a special term that has legal significance and year to year has actual numbers associated with it. But the code, when it talks about retention, and those numbers also are tied to the 55-year deed restrictions.
Right.
Okay, maybe it was a smaller number before, but it's 55 now. But when we talk in the code of preservation of existing affordable housing, that's affordable housing not capitalized. It's not a special phrase, and it has no tie to area median income or any of those other things. I went back and, because when I saw discussions of a certain case that involved 4 properties within the city, and the city's contention was that which I would, since I live nearby, I would characterize as substandard housing, was in fact being rented at numbers that placed it well down the scale in the legally deed restricted affordable housing.
They're market rate affordable because they're substandard.
They're not, they are,
Market rate is affordable, right?
They call that
market rate is
naturally
not
occurring.
affordable. Moderate and below is affordable. But according to the part of the code that talks about preservation of existing affordable housing, just says, what's the rent?
Right.
Not is it deed restricted,
Gotcha.
just what is the rent?
So they're,
And the rent on substandard housing is bound to be lower.
yeah. So the city is defining their own version of affordable housing.
Yeah, it's the preservation of existing. It's funny that it doesn't say deed restricted affordable housing.
It doesn't, because it doesn't mean that.
Right.
Well, it wasn't for the Becker project.
Hey, let's stay away from
Oh,
the
okay.
names of
The one
projects.
case we had.
Thank you.
That was like what we call natural occurring affordable housing, other words, substandard.
Yes.
And we said
It was
they have,
non-capitalized affordable
Yeah,
housing,
yeah.
because it wasn't deed restricted.
that's true. And so I don't know how we determined it was affordable, but somehow
By
they
a
did.
survey of the renters.
And we insisted that they needed to replace it, and of course, there was a debate about that.
Yeah.
Whether it was, timing and all that sort of thing, but anyway, yeah.
But we need at some point to sort out capitalized affordable housing versus
Yeah.
non-capitalized
It's very confusing.
Be
affordable
great-
housing.
It would be great to have a different term.
Okay.
Could you explain the housing rehabilitation program for target assistance within that category, with the goal of rehabbing 16 units? Who does,
Is this in-
who pays
is
for
this
it?
in Program 16?
Yes.
So the rehabilitation is essentially the compliance program. So taking those units that are substandard in terms of safety and bringing those into compliance. That on average, we're seeing about 16 a year. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little less. What council has done over the last couple of years, over the last couple of cycles, in terms of extending it and then reducing some of the barriers to get those units online, is to move the year in which they qualify, and then extending the year out in which we can continue to go forward with the compliance program.
Okay.
So that in a nutshell is what that 16 that you're seeing there.
So these are units that your code enforcement has determined are substandard.
Not code
Oh,
code
use
enforcement.
it says code
It's-
enforcement to
It's
address.
well, it's building / code enforcement, I guess. We have a specific officer that reviews these.
Maybe,
But-
maybe I've lost the bubble on this, but when the compliance program started, as I recall, the requirement was you specify to the city and you prove to the city what year this particular ADU, we'll call it now, this second unit, it's a candidate for the compliance program, what year it was built.
Right.
You demonstrate when you converted that garage, or when you built that shed, or whatever it is that's now an ADU, or you want it to be. And you had to show that it was code compliant with the code at that time, not the current code. Has that changed?
No, there's still a requirement for you to provide paperwork, some sort of
No, not-
documentation.
The requiring paperwork, I understand.
Right.
But if you produced paperwork that showed, I converted my garage to a rental unit with a kitchen in it in 1960, does that structure then, to successfully get through the compliance program, does it meet the code from 1960 or the code from 2020?
It's still considered non-conforming, but legal non-conforming.
So,
But it's then legal.
Right.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Not conforming to the current standards, because
Sure.
if it's that long ago, then yes, what
But
you're
it
doing is
becomes
you're
legal.
Right.
Okay.
Larry, ask a
So
question.
these could be any rental unit. Is that true?
Any unit that is currently not online,
Yeah, I know.
Now, on what?
online, meaning it's not a unit that
He's been patient.
has been identified as being built in compliance of the code, meaning we don't have record of it.
I see.
That's where most of them came from.
And so
Built
how do
without
we help
permits.
them rehabilitate?
We look for it to become safe. We're looking for safety pieces.
So you're encourage the owner to make it safe, and you're having a
Not
low-
encouraging. There are a number of parameters that they've got to go through in order for it to be
so they can't
to be
rent
brought
it.
into a legal non-conforming
To
compliance.
make it legal, they're gonna have to come up to some code standard.
I see, and
of
they can't
whatever
rent
date.
it until that point.
Up till then, it's not legal. And
I
if
mean,
they
they-
try to sell the house, the realtor is gonna have a requirement to disclose that there's an illegal structure on the property,
Right.
I believe.
Yeah. If they're doing their due
Ignorance
diligence.
is
which-
bliss, right?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, hold on. Wait, hold on. Chair Quillisi.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
We
Wanna make
will-
sure we're
We'll
doing this.
have phase 3 of the public comment.
No. Larry Steingold, one question. I know when I took my real estate exam here in the state, I think they had some sort of provision that every apartment that gets rented has to be inspected or signed off by someone regarding code, I do believe. And a lot of the cities and states have this, so that it ensures that apartments are kept up to code. Usually it's regarding fire. But a tenant goes vacant, somebody signs off, somebody trots over, they go, this is great. Maybe there's no code violations, it may be an ugly apartment, but it's not a violation, so they sign off and say it's okay. It's the way to get
But
upgrades.
what version of the code? The building standards code changes every 3 years.
But we don't do that here.
Right, I'm just saying.
Usually it's big
No,
cities
but
that have those kind of
It's larger
programs.
cities that have.
Well, it's like having bicycles that are supposed to be registered, but they never are.
Greensboro and
I got you.
Raleigh.
It's just part of it.
All right.
I've got a
Now
quick question.
we closed phase 3 again.
Yeah, that's okay. Quick question on item 3 under 16. Continued financial support of the Community Assistance Program, Rental Assistance Program administered by Help of Ojai. So we have a financial support community assistant program.
Help of Ojai has one.
Help of Ojai administers the program.
It says continue financial support. It implies that we're supporting them.
We're supporting them financially somehow.
Does this year's budget have money in there?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
We did
I mean,
give
I
them
can look
money
into that
last
further.
year.
We need
We're
to promote
saying that that's being continued. I don't know if that financial support was when they were occupying the buildings that are on this campus, and that was our financial support. I'm not sure if there's more involved in that, if we've been giving them financial support
Gave
otherwise.
them, I think, 10,000 last year. They were one
Oh,
of the,
community grants.
they
Yeah.
were one of the
Not
community
this
grant
year.
recipients. I
Oh,
think it
okay.
was 10,000.
That's interesting.
Why are there so many bugs in here?
The doors, I'm sorry.
So if we don't continue giving them support like we have in the past, are we in violation of this?
If we're not providing support, then when we can't use as credit. So, but the reality is that it sometimes in some of these situations it switches on and off in terms of how we're doing some of these things
Yeah.
from year to year. The idea is that we continue to do that. It just depends on what that financial report looks like. Right.
Okay.
All right. 17, anti-displacement. What's that about, Alex?
Well, the objective for this is to continue implementation of the city's anti-displacement provisions.
That's part of that no net loss thing again?
I think that's
From program
10290.
one?
That sounds like 10294 again.
It's,
And
It
that's
is-
just that sounds to me like that's just monitoring at this point in terms of what we're doing. It's funny that we actually put in here funding sources, the development.
Why
or
does
the
it
department
say the
budget.
village mixed-use district?
I guess they had issues at the VMU at some point.
That's what, it starts out in the first sentence.
Yeah, the village mixed use, I mean, we all know that that's a transitional district, zoning district. And it has literally a hodgepodge of different uses, all kind of intermixed and intertwined, right? Before you get into kind of the heavier multifamily to the north and to the west in certain areas, and commercial to the south and to the east. But then again, you have then village mixed use kind of sprinkled within certain areas to transition. It is kind of interesting how the village mixed use works like that. We've talked about it before.
It includes a lot of purely residential properties right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Up to the middle of Eucalyptus Street, which
I mean,
is
you've heard me talk
several
about
blocks off.
other cities, village mixed use does not include single family, but here we do. Because we recognize that there are single family, instead of immediately identifying them as non-conforming, they are conforming to that zone and can continue. But then there's also opportunities for them to be converted.
Okay, but this
So-
this talks about resulting in the loss of dwelling units.
Yeah, so
If there's a parcel that has a residence and an ADU on it,
that's in the village mixed use.
so this program 17 only applies to VMU.
I think it's using VMU as an example. It's just,
Well, it says here, oh my God, cramp.
I'm just wondering if,
It exempts
If
removal
someone-
and demolition of single-family homes on a single parcel. That's exempt from this. And
Yeah,
also
that-
removal of non-conforming uses.
yeah,
That would almost include every naturally affordable house in the city.
in terms of being non-conforming.
Oh, I see, that's zoning non-conforming. I was thinking, yeah, okay, yeah.
But the single family piece is baked into the code currently. It allows for you to demo a house and not get dinged for it. Single family residential house.
okay,
On a
but if
single
there's,
parcel.
if there's an SFR there and an ADU, and someone buys that parcel,
The ADU is not
and
exempt.
bulldozes both of those dwelling units and builds a larger house, single house, on that parcel, have they violated some part of the code?
The ADU would be because it's a unit. We look at the ADU as a unit. So right now, if you have 2 units, the single family residential home itself could be demoed. But if you're demoing the ADU, you've got to figure out, the assumption is that you're rebuilding it. I can't imagine why somebody would do that, but
Well, sometimes people do it and they build bigger houses.
so I guess I could see it that way.
View lot that was,
You know, that happens in all kinds of cities.
That's what I'm asking, does that violate the code somewhere?
It would be, yeah. They would have to, so anti-displacement, that's really what it boils down to.
So
that
you better
says
warn people
if
when they do
there's-
ADUs, they can't demo their house.
Anytime that we're looking at demos, which are not that often, just to be fair.
Yeah.
I think we've had one demo of a house in the last 4 years since I've been here, just one. No, I'm wrong. 2.
one burned.
So double what I just said.
But if there are 2 legal dwelling units on a parcel,
Which neither one of those had. They were both single
well,
family.
if there were, then any redevelopment of the parcel has to maintain at least 2 legal dwelling units.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, hold on. No. Sorry. Because I have to
Okay.
make sure it's correct. One is single family. So you have a single family and then you have the ADU. The ADU is counted as a unit, but the single family is not counted as a unit because the exemption within our code, and I want to say it's 102904, I think that's the provision that we're looking at.
Could be, okay.
Speaks to that point. Now,
No, so you're saying you can demo the principal residence and rebuild something in its place, but you can't demo the ADU?
not unless you're rebuilding it somewhere else on the site.
Yeah, so you have to maintain
Or you're
2
going,
legal dwelling units.
yeah. Or you're paying for it through the in-lieu fees for affordable housing.
Yeah, if you're demoing,
Okay.
making a McMansion, you
All right.
wouldn't care about that.
Yeah.
Folks, we're near the end. 18, sustainability.
Getting close.
You asked to go point by point.
Well, people ask
25
us
words
about
or
these
less.
things.
Could just ignore what they say sometimes.
So sustainability is the next one.
sorry. So keep in mind, all of these are under the conservation and rehabilitation category. And so, program 18. let me get that. Yeah, program 18, sustainability. The
Energy conservation, okay, green
Yeah.
building
Yeah.
standards.
Yeah, it's got.
Yeah, the
it's got
objective
reach
for
codes
this-
built into
yeah.
their lead standards. So it's basically saying, hey, look, you're doing good things. You're being sustainable. Let's make sure that we continue to do that. That's really what that means.
That's a good 25 word or less.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yes.
Moving on.
We got there.
Except the reach code
He's
may be
going
in
to ask
question.
about something, I know
Say
it.
the
Gonna bring up
may
reach
be a
code.
legal question.
Maybe, but it's not right now.
Yeah, 6 months we've got.
Yeah. So then 19 is fair housing. You want me to talk?
Oh, yeah. You
You can say. All right. So we have housing mobility, housing choices in high opportunity areas, place-based strategy for neighborhood improvement, and that's through state and federal. CDBG is. We don't get a lot of money from CDBG. Just to be frank, we get like a puddle of money compared to other communities. But we still use it, but it's not enough for us to sit here and be like, hey, we're going to make these amazing improvements. It's like maybe we do a curb cut here and there.
I'm
It's
just
not a lot of money.
looking a little farther down the page, it says, under objectives and timelines, California Fair Employment and Housing Act prohibits discrimination and harassment, but discrimination in all aspects of housing. What does that mean?
What portion are you looking at here?
The
I'm
bottom
looking-
paragraph on page
The first,
15.
it's program 19,
Okay.
objectives and timelines, outreach and enforcement.
I believe it's in terms of advertisement, leasing. So it kind of runs the whole gamut of.
It prohibits discrimination in all aspects of housing.
Like
Right.
selling
I
it?
think it's not just this. It's not the selling or the leasing. It's also like the advertisement. So you can't.
Okay.
You couldn't post like a racist advertisement saying you only
Okay.
rent to a certain kind of people.
Okay,
Denying
But-
the use of Section 8 would be a discrimination.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is there's
I don't know, discrimination is in the mind of the beholder.
I think here it's referring to the race, creed, age, or sex, and the other defined protected classes under California law.
Well, that's part of it. But I think discrimination may also include saying you can't buy a house here unless you work here,
or you live here,
or you live here, or your profession is XYZ. Is that all part of discrimination that's prohibited?
I don't know if that's outlined by California law.
Right. I think agreeing with Commissioner Trent, I'm not sure all of that. The broad scope you outlined is prohibited by California law.
Okay,
Some of it, I
There
think,
was an
certainly is. Though.
example that could have been, but it's not, it's sponsored by the city. There was this.
Let's
proposal.
let's not get into any specifics. Just before
No,
you.
the
Okay.
proposal was to set up some kind of contact thing where you could call people, you're looking for a home, and they would like arrange with the owner whether you fit into that home for what that owner wanted. That had so many potentials for discrimination in it.
so it was basically screening.
It was a screening thing, yes, it had,
Making service.
but we weren't doing it, the city wasn't doing it, but it was a proposal, and someone suggested the city should fund it, which we never got to that point, but yes, that, to me, just screamed of discrimination.
Oh, the last page.
So this one about,
Tunnel.
through, wait a minute, I've read somewhere here where you're gonna
wait,
try
it's an
to
oncoming train.
improve neighborhoods.
Yeah, oops.
Oh, place-based strategy for neighborhood improvements.
Yeah, so have we targeted, neighborhoods that have inaccessible sidewalks, pedestrian crossings, that sort of thing?
Yeah, that stuff's done through
You couldn't begin to
CDB.
count the number of neighborhoods
It's
that
like
have
all of them.
inaccessible sidewalks. But that's part of the charm of Ojai.
But I think we're talking about low-income areas would be the, not just any area, obviously. Fairview,
I don't know.
Fairview doesn't have sidewalks, but you
Does
wouldn't
it
count
say
that.
target specific low-income neighborhoods for public improvements?
CBDG is about low-income neighborhoods, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it targets the low income, but it's really kind of citywide too.
Yeah.
Like I said before, we don't get a lot of money from CDBG, so it's probably half of a project each year. Portion of it's funded.
We apply to this?
CDBG money?
Yeah.
Every year, yes.
And who decides what we're gonna apply for?
That actually is ran through Public Works because they're the ones that are doing the sidewalks or the curb cuts or the improvements at
Yeah.
intersections.
I see, okay. So as they're expanding their street paving and so forth, they'll look to see whether they can get CDBG.
Yeah, it's not necessarily street paving.
But I meant
it's-
put the sidewalk part in.
Right.
with it,
That's the
something.
piece. Or the improvements to get it up to current code.
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Whew, we got through it.
9 o'clock.
Well, we'll do it again sometime.
Now, I wanna go
This
back
isn't-
through it backwards.
Yeah, this isn't going to be the only time we do it. In fact, there may be times where we're bringing one of these programs forward and saying, hey, look, we're looking at doing this. We're at this phase with this
Yeah.
particular program. Or we're bringing forward some sort of a draft or some sort of a discussion or a term sheet, something like that.
Right.
So you can expect this kind of lays the groundwork. Alex and I are working behind the scenes right now.
And thank you for laying it all out.
Yeah.
I think it was
Thank you, guys.
very helpful, because
Yeah,
now I
it
kind
was.
of understand
That was great.
most of these things. Some of them I
Vice Chair
didn't.
Bennett missed a riveting conversation.
Well, he can listen to the video.
He can watch the tape back. Maybe he's listening
probably
right now.
did.
He's not allowed to come back here and discuss any of these items until he watches this video. That's an instructional
Got to
video.
do his own homework.
Instructional video.
All right, item 3, future agenda items.
Yep, up and coming is design review permit 22-012. It's that two-story addition to the main residence at 1206 Ayers. That's coming forward, and it's good.
You've achieved some level of agreement on what should come back to us?
Compromise and compliance with the code is probably the best way to put that.
Great, great.
That's what, I think that was one of our most successful, public hearings and interactions that we had.
Yeah, it was a riveting discussion and to some degree a debate too.
Emotional in places, as
There are
it should have
certain,
been.
there's certain professional individuals that don't agree with the way in which
But I
staff
mean, we
interpreted
got
certain
the
things. but-
neighbors, everybody
Yeah.
working together with us. I think they were happy with it, so I think
Yeah.
that was really.
All right, so the next one is design review permit 23-001, Ojai Roti, and that's adding a shade trellis at 469 East Ojai.
They have they
Avenue.
have some canvas covers right now.
Yeah, those are kind of a temporary
they
piece.
legal?
No, they're not. But I haven't gone after them yet. So I know that this application's in, so I'm holding until this gets resolved.
Okay.
They're on your short list.
They're on my short list. And then, so that's May 3rd. And I don't see any other items going on May 3rd because we've already sent out the notices for those two. For the 17th, it's the appeal of the director's decision to deny the request for a gas meter on a vacant lot for a new construction. And it's that 401 B and C, so it's the 3 units at East Topa Street.
Right.
You had seen this before. They've brought forward additional information. We've deemed it complete now at this point and are moving forward. I'm not going
We
to
can-
go into any more detail on that.
Right. Okay,
And then we've got some items that are pending right now, and others that are in the queue, and we've actually had some applications just
1202 East Ojai is the bowling alley, right?
Yeah, there's some information that we've asked for. We've gotten some of it, but that one it's getting close. That's why it's on the top of pending.
And the one at Longhorn Lane, I didn't realize there was any empty property in Pursuit.
There is one. It's on the kind of on the corner.
Okay.
You drive through that area and you don't notice it because it slopes down. So it'll be
This is near Montgomery.
yeah, and it will require it to come before this body because there is a 2-story element. So
Yeah, okay.
and then we just had a joint meeting on Tuesday.
1440 daily again. All right.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that one. Sorry.
Okay. No, I just remembered that address. It was
Yeah, it was like one of my first meetings when I started here. It was a while ago, if that tells you anything. Tuesday, April 18th, yesterday, we just had that joint meeting. I'm
Right.
not gonna go into any details on that. We all lived it.
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did.
And we're going to have at least one more to try to cover the other two elements, I guess, that we didn't get to in that.
Sometime in the near future. I don't know that we have a date for that, but yes.
So we're gonna have are we on to commissioner comments?
Let's
Are
see,
we
what's
gonna
the-
have a future agenda item on officially reinstating the housing task force?
Yes.
Or are
so-
we already on
Sure.
reinstating?
Well, I think we probably should make it official and have that
Okay.
conversation. So Chair Quillisi and I can work through what that looks like, but bring it to the next meeting.
So the second question I have, are we required to meet every 2 weeks? I mean, meet twice a month?
Yes,
Is the planning commission? Yes.
By law or by the
by
ordinance?
code.
Well, I think
I don't think it's in the code. I don't recall seeing
the
it.
law. Help me out here.
Not by law. I thought it was in the municipal code where it set a date. Or sorry, I thought
It says
said
the first and third Tuesdays I'm sorry, first and third Wednesdays. of each-
right. That was my.
If you look at Title 10, Chapter 1.
I'd have to go back and look at it
It's
again.
in
I don't
there.
recall seeing that part. Because, I've been on other planning commissions, and usually you have 1 month where you only have one meeting, so you actually can have a vacation. And
So
I'm gonna
you're-
have to miss
You're
one to
wondering,
take a
are there gonna be
vacation.
times where we're going to be canceling meetings, and there could be.
Well, the first week of July, the 4th of July, 'cause I'm gonna be gone, but, not that these should do it, but it just seems like, I know most, city councils and county commissioners usually would have
this
1
one
month, like a
does.
July, where they only have one meeting a month, so people can go on vacation.
It answered your
For
question.
volunteers.
Section 10 dash 1.03 in the middle of the paragraph says meetings of the commission shall be held at least once a month at such times and places as the commission may fix by resolution. And I believe by resolution it says first and third Wednesdays. So
By resolution of us or of the,
Like city council.
the city council.
Once a month.
That's what it says.
As fixed by resolution.
so do we have the
Not our
resolution
resolution.
somewhere? Can we request that resolution be modified and a future agenda item
Well-
to?
Well, I don't know that I would
we
go
have
to that.
one
Yeah,
city-
I don't think we need to go to that extent. We have canceled meetings in the past for lack of
Lack of items.
items or
And we've had-
not having a
and
quorum.
We've had special meetings because of an exceptional backlog of cases.
Exactly. There's the next line in the code actually mentions
Plan a
special meetings.
vacation on hoping there's gonna be lack of items. I had
I
to
think
make
it-
reservations like a month ago to go to Europe.
You know what we could do as just a suggestion, and I did this a year ago. I brought forward the calendar as a discussion item, and we looked at the calendar and said, yeah, this month I'm going to be gone on this day, or this month I'm planning a vacation on this day. I'm not going to be here. And we start doing the straw poll on who's going to even be here for those meetings, and then recognize that we already know in the second meeting in August, I've got 2 members. I don't have enough. So we're going to cancel that item.
So
We
some
all
of
have
those-
lives outside of
Lack of
this.
a
So a
quorum.
couple other people take a vacation in July 4th, so I not have to miss one.
Well, what day is July 4th this year?
Uh,
Is it on a Monday?
well, it's not on July 4th, the particular meeting.
Oh.
I think it's like July 1st or
But
something.
there would be one of our meetings the week of July.
Let's see, July 4th is on a Monday, so July 6th is, no, July 5th would be the day after.
July 4th is a Tuesday this year.
Yeah, so July 5th would be our meeting normally.
Yeah, I mean, I can just tell you right now that I'm not going to be here.
Okay, so let's cancel that one?
Let's bring out the
Let's-
calendar.
We're not
can
making
do
any
that.
commitments right now.
What we could do is I could talk to the
Let's-
chair, and we
Let's
can
talk
bring
about
that.
it, yeah.
Okay,
But thank you for bringing that to your attention. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
That's an interesting discussion we should have. Director's report, anything else you want to add, Lucas?
I've been pretty long-winded tonight, but I would say this, in terms of bringing an item back, it's that ad hoc committee for housing. And having that discussion, re-energizing who is on it, and then the 2 members that were on it for just a flash in the pan, you may want to start having conversations in terms of how you're going to be addressing it and
We
moving
plan
forward.
to.
So, okay.
Judy's gonna take me out for dinner at the,
One of the
It was a late
oh, I thought we were going to,
go to coffee.
Yeah, Java and Joe.
Look, I don't. That's
Joe and
beyond.
Joe
That's
are
beyond
the-
the scope of this meeting.
We haven't
You can
decided.
sort that out. But that's something that I'll be talking to Chair Quillisi about.
And when we discuss that, I would also like to discuss renewing our request, which has not been denied, but has not been addressed, of having a parking committee.
Well, right now there's already a parking ad hoc committee by City Council that's been re-energized.
There's also a housing ad hoc committee at city council, right?
Yes, but the council
They just
gave.
allowed us to have our own ad
Right.
hoc.
The council just
Housing
gave direction that yes, this planning commission body can be a part and do their own work and whatever that work ends
On
up
housing.
looking like on housing.
Yeah.
Without city staff.
but on the parking.
Without city staff, that's an important piece that I want to. So if you're asking for myself or anybody, any staff member to help out with stuff, it's going to be a no on my end.
So on the parking, if I can clarify, we had a Commissioner Lang here, and you brought that up, and I brought it up,
I asked if
and I've had a
planning commissioners were going to be a part of their parking committee.
She said she would check
She
with
was
the
not
manager
available.
or staff, and I know Souza, I've talked to Souza since then, and she wants us to be on there, two people or at least one.
As I said, our request has not been denied, it just has not been addressed yet.
But that's, yeah, Rachel
gonna
implied it
bring it
was
up.
up to her and Souza, because they're the committee.
Last night was long enough.
So anyway,
Yeah.
whatever.
Sorry.
Okay,
And we don't want to meet last night's.
Hey, you guys are
do that again.
Yeah, we're pushing
hovering,
it.
hovering close to it.
Okay,
Look, we went through 19 items, and what took them like longer to go through 3 items. So, hey, I think we were pretty damn efficient.
all
Call
right.
it a
Any
win.
other commission member reports?
No, I'm good.
All right. City council liaison is not here.
Right.
Pat,
Just so you know, she had identified that she would not be here.
She's on Zoom raising her hand.
Oh, she is. Well, that's even better.
It's here, okay,
Well, all
great.
right. Let's hear from our city council liaison.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I've been here the whole time, but I did not want to expose anyone to COVID, so I am staying at home, and I'm
Thank you.
hopeful that you will all appreciate it. I talked to Mayor Pro Tem Francina briefly about the parking, about the having you on the parking, and we have not been able to have an in-depth conversation, but it is something that she and I are both on board with. And so we will present that to the city manager, and we will start making motions to move forward with seeing, you know, what that would involve. So I do hear you, and you know, we just have not had a chance to. It is still under consideration, and you have both of our nods of approval.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I had just one piece of business to report. And two pieces. You already addressed the ad hoc housing committee, and it was voted that if you wanted to have an ad hoc committee, that we are okay with that. We ourselves are going to have housing workshops. And so we are putting a pause on establishing any kind of affordable housing committee right now. We're going to see what it looks like for us to have one, what the needs are, what the community interest is, and then we're going to structure one after we do the workshop. And we're planning to do that within the next 90 days. So this is something that is a priority for the entire council, and it's something that we're moving forward with.
Okay,
So.
Good.
So, but if you wanted to do something on your own within your commission, that is something that we would be okay with, as long as as Lucas stated, as long as it doesn't involve staff, and that would be okay. And then finally, one other thing that I wanted to report on is that pertains to you, is that during our last meeting, we discussed whether or not to rewrite the policy pertaining to the number of commissioners for each city commission. And so, as you know, at one time we had 7 commissioners. That changed. The HPC expressed interest in moving back to a 7-person committee, and so we opened that up for conversation. The HPC and Parks and Rec both opted to move to a 7-person committee, and the Arts Commission and your committee or commission will remain at 5. And so that per your choice. So we're basically giving each commission, the right to have as many commissioners as, or not as many commissioners, but to choose between 5 or going up
5
to
or
7.
Their choice, okay.
And so that was one thing that was discussed. We also initiated a discussion about the selection process for commissioners, but we decided to postpone that discussion. And so we're going to set it aside for a later date. Nothing has been decided. Nothing has been put into motion with regard to our selection process. But I just wanted to give you a heads up and let you know that that was something that was begun and initiated, and something that had been on the table.
Great, thank you.
Did you enjoy our
Absolutely.
meeting?
What's that?
Did you enjoy our meeting?
I enjoyed the meeting, and I enjoyed tonight's meeting, and the formula. I'm very excited about that, and I loved hearing the public comments, and I really just appreciate all of you, all the work that you put in, and I loved last night's meeting too. I thought we really came to some great discussion about what our vision for the community is moving forward.
Very cool.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you all very much.
Warn us next time that you're going to be here the whole time. Well, I might not have said some things.
I warned Lucas, and so yeah. So I told him earlier I'll be there. I missed the Stonewall Democrats meeting, but but I was here. I was listening the whole time,
But we
taking my notes.
appreciate it.
Yeah, much
Thank
appreciated.
you very much for that, yes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, and seeing no further business before the commission at 9:12, we are adjourned.
All right.